Platonism, philosophy of Plato. Imagine lying in bed, the weight of the day slowly fading as your mind begins to drift. In those quiet moments, your thoughts wander, reflecting on the nature of reality itself, the eternal questions that have puzzled humanity for millennia, and the timeless quest for truth and beauty that lies at the heart of existence. What if, instead of falling into the usual cycle of worry and overthinking, you could immerse yourself in the calming, transcendent wisdom of ancient philosophy? Imagine letting the teachings of Platonism, with its vision of eternal forms and the soul's journey toward truth, lull you into a state of contemplative peace, helping you to release the shadows of daily concerns and embrace the luminous reality beyond the physical world. Philosophy isn't just for academic debates or intellectual exercises. It's a gateway to understanding our deepest nature and offers a profound balm for a restless mind seeking meaning. The wisdom of Plato teaches us about the true nature of reality and the soul's immortal journey toward knowledge. His insights remind us that much of what we perceive as real is merely shadows cast on the wall of a cave, while true reality exists in a realm of perfect, unchanging forms. As you listen to these ancient teachings, imagine ascending from the darkness of confusion toward the light of understanding, leaving behind the fleeting concerns of the material world for the eternal truths that illuminate the soul. In this way, Platonism becomes a comfort, encouraging you to look beyond the temporary illusions of daily life and connect with the timeless patterns that govern all existence. This is not about escaping reality, but about discovering what reality truly is beneath the surface appearances that normally occupy our attention. Then we explore the profound beauty of Plato's theory of forms, where perfect justice, beauty, and goodness exist as eternal blueprints for all that exists in our imperfect world. The Platonic vision teaches us that everything we experience in the physical realm is but a pale reflection of these perfect archetypes, shadows dancing on the wall of our limited perception. As you drift into contemplation, imagine the weight of material concerns dissolving away, revealing the luminous realm where true knowledge resides, where the soul recognizes its eternal home among the forms. This ancient understanding offers a perspective where the pressure to achieve perfection in the material world becomes unnecessary, since perfection already exists in its pure form in the realm of ideas. The philosophy of recollection shows us that learning is really remembering, that the soul, having existed before birth in the realm of perfect knowledge, carries within itself the capacity to recognize truth when it encounters it. In the stillness of the night, we explore the beautiful mystery of how the soul, through contemplation and philosophical inquiry, gradually awakens to the eternal truths it has always known but temporarily forgotten through its embodiment in the physical world. This ancient wisdom suggests that education is not the accumulation of new information, but the soul's gradual remembering of its divine nature and eternal knowledge. Each moment of genuine understanding is actually a moment of recognition, where the soul says, "Yes, I knew this all along," as it reconnects with truths it possessed before birth. We delve into the Platonic understanding of love, which begins with attraction to physical beauty, but ultimately leads the soul upward through increasingly refined forms of appreciation. From the love of one beautiful body to the love of all beautiful bodies, from the love of beautiful souls to the love of beautiful knowledge, and finally, to the love of beauty itself in its pure, eternal form. Through the gentle guidance of Eros, the soul ascends the ladder of being, moving from the realm of becoming toward the realm of pure being, where it finds its ultimate fulfillment in union with the good itself. This journey of love is not a rejection of the physical world, but a recognition that physical beauty points beyond itself to something even more magnificent. As you drift off, let the teachings of this great philosopher sink into your consciousness, gently shaping your understanding and bringing a sense of cosmic peace and clarity. Let the vision of the eternal forms carry you to a place of serene contemplation where the concerns of tomorrow fade and all that remains is the timeless pursuit of wisdom, truth, and beauty. In this quietude, may you find rest, renewal, and the seeds of philosophical insight that will guide you toward the light of understanding when morning comes. The Platonic journey is not one of struggle but of gentle ascent, a natural movement of the soul toward its true home in the realm of eternal light. The allegory of the cave. What if everything you believed to be real was nothing more than shadows dancing on a wall? This profound question lies at the heart of Plato's most famous allegory, the allegory of the cave, which presents us with a transformative vision of human existence, knowledge, and the philosopher's journey toward truth. Picture a deep, underground cave where prisoners have been chained since childhood, facing a wall with their backs to a fire that burns behind them. Between the fire and the prisoners, people carry various objects that cast shadows on the wall. These chained prisoners, having never seen anything else, believe these shadows to be the entirety of reality. The allegory continues as one prisoner breaks free from his chains and slowly makes his way toward the fire, then finally emerges from the cave into the brilliant sunlight above. At first, the light is painful and overwhelming. His eyes, accustomed to darkness, struggle to adjust to this new reality filled with actual objects, colors, and the blazing sun that illuminates everything. This powerful metaphor represents the soul's journey from ignorance to knowledge, from the world of appearances to the world of reality. The shadows on the cave wall represent the physical world that we perceive through our senses, a world that seems real but is actually just a reflection of a higher reality. The prisoners chained in the cave represent most of humanity, content to live with illusions and never questioning whether there might be something more real beyond what they can immediately perceive. They mistake the shadows for reality itself, just as we often mistake the temporary, changing world of material things for the ultimate truth of existence. The prisoner who breaks free represents the philosopher, the lover of wisdom who begins to question the nature of reality and embarks on the difficult journey toward truth. This journey is not easy or comfortable. Just as the escaped prisoner's eyes are pained by the bright light outside the cave, the philosopher's mind is often challenged and discomforted by new ideas that contradict familiar beliefs. The fire in the cave represents the sun in our physical world, the source of light that allows us to see physical objects. But even this fire is merely a reflection of the true sun, which in Plato's philosophy represents the form of the good, the highest and most perfect reality that illuminates all truth and makes knowledge possible. When the freed prisoner finally emerges into the sunlight, he discovers a world far more beautiful and real than anything he could have imagined while chained in the cave. The sun represents the form of the good, the source of all truth and reality. Just as the sun makes physical vision possible, the good makes intellectual vision and true knowledge possible. But the allegory doesn't end with the prisoner's escape. Plato continues the story by having the enlightened prisoner return to the cave to share his discoveries with those still chained. However, the other prisoners, comfortable in their familiar world of shadows, reject his testimony. They cannot understand his descriptions of the world above, and they may even become hostile toward him for challenging their cherished beliefs. This part of the allegory reflects the philosopher's role in society and the often difficult reception that new ideas and higher truths receive from those who are comfortable with conventional opinions. The philosopher, having seen reality more clearly, has a responsibility to share this knowledge, even though it may be met with resistance or ridicule. The journey from the cave represents the educational process that Plato believed was essential for the soul's development. Education is not merely filling an empty vessel with information, but rather turning the soul away from the world of becoming toward the world of being, from the realm of shadows and reflections toward the realm of eternal truths. This transformation requires courage, persistence, and often the willingness to leave behind familiar but limited ways of thinking. Like the prisoner adjusting to the bright light outside the cave, the mind learning to think philosophically must gradually develop its capacity to perceive more subtle and profound realities. The cave allegory also illustrates the different levels of reality that Plato identified in his metaphysical system. The shadows represent images and reflections, the lowest level of reality. The objects casting the shadows represent the physical things of our everyday world. The fire represents the sun and celestial bodies. And finally, the sun itself represents the form of the good, the highest reality. Each level of reality corresponds to a different way of knowing. The shadows correspond to imagination and conjecture. The physical objects correspond to belief and opinion based on sensory experience. The fire corresponds to mathematical thinking and reasoning, and the sun corresponds to pure intellectual knowledge of the eternal forms. As you contemplate this ancient wisdom, consider how it might apply to your own journey of understanding. What shadows might you be mistaking for reality? What chains of assumption or habit might be limiting your perception? The Platonic invitation is always to move toward greater clarity and truth, to question what seems obvious, and to seek the eternal principles that underlie changing appearances. The cave allegory suggests that each of us has the potential to break free from limited perspectives and discover more profound truths about existence. This is not merely an intellectual exercise, but a transformation that affects how we live, how we relate to others, and how we understand our purpose in the cosmos. In the quiet moments before sleep, let this ancient story remind you that reality extends far beyond what meets the eye, and that the human soul has an innate capacity to journey toward the light of truth and understanding. The path from the cave to the sunlit world above is the path of philosophy, and it remains open to all who have the courage to question, to learn, and to grow. The eternal forms. Beyond the world of constant change and decay that we perceive with our senses lies another realm entirely, a dimension of perfect, unchanging realities that Plato called the forms, or ideas. These eternal archetypes serve as the blueprints for everything that exists in our physical world, offering us a vision of reality that transcends the limitations of time and space. Consider the concept of a perfect circle. In the physical world, we can draw circular shapes, but none are perfectly round when examined closely enough. Every circle we create has slight irregularities, is composed of particles that give it texture and imperfection, and will eventually fade or decay. Yet somehow we can recognize these imperfect circles as circles and even conceive of what a perfect circle would be like. According to Plato's theory, this is possible because there exists a perfect form of circularity, an eternal, unchanging pattern of perfect roundness that serves as the standard by which we recognize and evaluate all circular shapes in the physical world. Every circle we encounter is simply a particular, imperfect participation in or imitation of this perfect form. This principle extends to all areas of reality. There is a perfect form of beauty itself beyond all particular beautiful things. There is a form of justice itself beyond all particular just actions or laws. There is a form of goodness itself beyond all particular good things. These forms exist in what Plato called the realm of being, a dimension of perfect, eternal, unchanging reality. The physical world, by contrast, is a realm of becoming, a domain of constant change where things come into existence, grow, decay, and pass away. Everything in this physical realm is characterized by imperfection, relativity, and temporality. A beautiful flower blooms and fades, a just law may become outdated, A good meal is consumed and exists no more, but the forms are eternal and perfect. The form of beauty never fades, the form of justice never becomes obsolete, the form of goodness never diminishes. They exist beyond time and space, accessible not to the senses but to the mind through reason and contemplation. This vision of reality provides a profound foundation for understanding knowledge, value, and meaning. When we recognize something as beautiful, we are actually recognizing its participation in the eternal form of beauty. When we identify an action as just, we are seeing how it corresponds to the perfect pattern of justice itself. The forms also explain how objective knowledge is possible. If reality consisted only of the constantly changing physical world, then everything would be relative and there would be no stable truths to know. But because the forms are eternal and unchanging, they provide stable objects for knowledge and serve as the standards by which we can make objective judgments about truth and value. Plato arranged the forms in a hierarchy with the form of the good at the summit. The good is not just another form among others, but the source and principle that makes all other forms possible. Just as the sun in the physical world makes vision and growth possible, the form of the good in the intelligible world makes knowledge and reality possible. The good is beyond being itself, lending reality and truth to all other forms. It is the source of all value, meaning, and intelligibility in the universe. While we can have some understanding of other forms through dialectical reasoning, the good itself can only be approached through a kind of mystical, intellectual vision that comes at the culmination of philosophical training. This hierarchy of reality has profound implications for how we understand ourselves and our purpose. Human beings exist simultaneously in both realms. Our bodies belong to the physical world of becoming, subject to change, growth, and decay. But our souls belong to the realm of being and have a natural affinity for the eternal forms. The soul's highest activity is contemplation of the forms, especially the form of the good. This contemplation is not merely intellectual but transformative. It purifies the soul and aligns it with the eternal patterns of reality. The philosopher who has achieved knowledge of the forms is not just better informed but actually becomes more real, more fully actualized as a human being. This understanding transforms how we approach learning and education. The goal is not merely to accumulate information about the physical world, but to develop the soul's capacity to perceive eternal truths. Mathematics is particularly valuable in this educational process because it deals with precise, unchanging relationships that point beyond the physical toward the eternal. When a student grasps a mathematical proof, they are not just learning facts, but developing their capacity to perceive timeless patterns and relationships. This preparation gradually enables the soul to turn away from the world of shadows and appearances toward the luminous realm of eternal forms. The theory of forms also provides a foundation for ethics and politics. Actions are good, or just not merely because they conform to social conventions, but because they participate in the eternal forms of goodness and justice. A truly just state would be one organized according to the eternal pattern of justice itself, not merely according to human preferences or power arrangements. This creates both high standards and ultimate hope for human societies. While perfect justice may never be fully realized in the physical world, the eternal form of justice provides an unchanging standard by which we can evaluate and improve our institutions and practices. In personal ethics, the theory of forms calls us to align our lives with eternal values rather than temporary preferences. The good life is one that participates as fully as possible in the eternal forms, seeking true beauty rather than mere appearance, genuine justice rather than mere advantage, authentic goodness rather than mere pleasure. As you rest in contemplation of these profound truths, consider how this ancient vision might illuminate your own experience. What eternal patterns and values call to your soul beyond the shifting preferences and opinions of daily life? The Platonic invitation is to recognize that your deepest aspirations point toward eternal realities that can serve as guides for living with wisdom, beauty, and truth. The forms represent not escapism from the world, but engagement with the eternal foundations that make the world meaningful and valuable. They remind us that beyond all change and imperfection lies a realm of perfect truth, waiting to be discovered by souls courageous enough to seek it, the immortal soul. At the heart of Platonic philosophy lies a remarkable understanding of human nature that sees each person as fundamentally more than their physical body. According to Plato, the true self is the soul, an immortal, rational principle that exists before birth, survives bodily death, and carries within itself the capacity for eternal knowledge and wisdom. This vision of the soul emerges from Plato's fundamental insight that knowledge of eternal truths requires something eternal within us to grasp them. If the soul were merely a product of physical processes, it could only know physical things. But since we can understand mathematics, recognize moral principles, and contemplate eternal forms, our souls must partake of the eternal realm themselves. The soul's immortality is not just a philosophical postulate, but a practical reality that shapes how we should understand and live our lives. We are not temporary accidents in a meaningless universe, but eternal beings on a journey of learning and purification that extends far beyond any single lifetime. Plato presents several arguments for the soul's immortality, each illuminating different aspects of our eternal nature. The argument from opposites suggests that just as sleeping and waking, growth and decay, are part of natural cycles, so death and life must be part of a larger cycle in which souls move between embodied and disembodied existence. The argument from recollection demonstrates that learning is actually the soul's remembering of truths it knew before birth. When we grasp a mathematical proof or recognize a moral principle, we are not acquiring new information, but awakening to knowledge that was already present within us. This suggests that the soul existed before birth in a state where it had direct access to eternal truths. The argument from affinity shows that the soul has a natural kinship with eternal, unchanging realities rather than with temporal, changing things. While the body is composite, visible, and subject to dissolution, the soul is simple, invisible, and naturally inclined toward what is eternal and unchanging. This natural affinity suggests that the soul, like the objects of its knowledge, is itself eternal. But immortality is not merely duration. Living forever would mean nothing if it involved endless repetition of ignorance or suffering. For Plato, the soul's immortality is meaningful because it involves the possibility of infinite growth in wisdom, virtue, and understanding of truth. The soul has several parts or aspects, each with its own function and character. The rational part seeks truth and wisdom, delighting in contemplation of eternal realities. The spirited part seeks honor and victory, providing courage and determination. The appetitive part seeks pleasure and satisfaction of bodily desires. A well-ordered soul is one in which reason rules, spirit supports reason's decisions, and the appetites are guided by rational principles rather than mere impulse. This psychological harmony corresponds to justice in the individual, just as political justice involves each part of the state fulfilling its proper function. The soul's journey through different lifetimes provides opportunities for learning and moral development that would be impossible within a single embodied existence. Experiences of suffering may purify the soul of attachments to lower pleasures. Experiences of beauty may awaken the soul's memory of eternal beauty itself. Encounters with wisdom may gradually prepare the soul for more direct knowledge of eternal truths. This understanding transforms how we view both fortune and misfortune in life. External circumstances. Wealth or poverty, health or sickness, praise or blame, affect only the temporary bodily aspect of our existence. The soul's true welfare depends on its growth in wisdom and virtue, which can occur in any external circumstances, and is entirely under our control through our choices and attitudes. The philosopher's life becomes a kind of practice for dying, not in a morbid sense, but as a gradual purification of the soul's attention away from bodily concerns toward eternal truths. Each moment spent in genuine contemplation strengthens the soul's capacity to exist independently of physical circumstances and prepares it for its eventual separation from the body. Death, from this perspective, is not an ending, but a transition, a release of the soul from the limitations of embodied existence into a state where it can more directly apprehend eternal realities. The soul that has been purified through philosophical practice approaches this transition with confidence rather than fear. Between lifetimes, souls exist in a state where they can directly perceive the forms without the distraction and limitations of physical embodiment. This is the soul's natural state from which it falls into physical existence and to which it aspires to return. The goal is not to escape embodiment permanently, but to use each embodied existence as an opportunity for learning and purification. The soul's choice of its next life, according to Plato's myth of air, depends on the wisdom and character it has developed. Souls that have grown in virtue and understanding choose lives that will provide further opportunities for learning and service. Souls that remain attached to lower pleasures may choose lives dominated by those same attachments. This vision of moral development extending across lifetimes provides both ultimate responsibility and infinite hope. We are fully responsible for our character and choices, since these determine our soul's trajectory across eternity. But we also have unlimited opportunities to grow, learn, and become more perfect expressions of our divine nature. The soul's natural immortality also means that relationships based on shared love of wisdom and virtue have an eternal dimension. Friendships formed through common pursuit of truth continue beyond death, since they are based on the soul's eternal nature rather than temporary physical circumstances. This understanding of the soul provides profound comfort in facing life's inevitable losses and limitations. While bodies age and die, while particular circumstances change and pass away, the essential self continues its journey toward greater wisdom and understanding. Death cannot touch what is most truly ourselves. The implications extend beyond personal consolation to encompass our deepest aspirations and values. If we are eternal beings, then our choices in this lifetime have infinite significance. How we use our opportunities for learning, how we treat others, how we respond to both pleasure and suffering, all of this shapes our soul's eternal trajectory. As you contemplate this ancient vision of human nature, consider how it might transform your understanding of your own life and purpose. You are not merely a temporary arrangement of physical elements, but an eternal soul on a journey of infinite potential. The challenges and opportunities of this lifetime are precious chances for growth that will bear fruit across eternity. Let this perspective bring both urgency and serenity to your days. Urgency because the opportunities for learning and virtue that life presents are infinitely valuable. Serenity because your essential nature is eternal and indestructible, beyond the reach of fortune's changes. The soul's journey toward truth and goodness is the most real and important adventure possible. The theory of recollection. One of Plato's most beautiful and mysterious teachings suggests that all learning is actually a process of remembering, that the soul, in its eternal nature, already possesses knowledge of all truth, and what we call education is really the gradual recovery of wisdom that was temporarily obscured by our embodiment in the physical world. This theory emerges from a profound puzzle about the nature of knowledge itself. How is it possible for us to recognize truth when we encounter it? If we were truly ignorant, we wouldn't be able to distinguish truth from falsehood when we found it. But if we already knew the truth, there would be no need to seek it. The theory of recollection resolves this paradox by suggesting that the soul has a kind of dormant knowledge that can be awakened through proper questioning and contemplation. Plato illustrates this principle through the famous dialogue with Meno's slave boy, who is able to discover geometric truths despite having no formal mathematical training. Through careful questioning, Socrates helps the boy recognize that a square with sides twice as long has 4 times the area, and that to double a square's area, one must use the diagonal as the side of the new square. The remarkable thing is that the boy reaches these insights not by being told the answers, but by being guided to see what was already potentially present in his mind. He experiences the aha moment of recognition that feels like remembering something temporarily forgotten rather than learning something entirely new. This suggests that the soul, before its embodiment, existed in direct contact with eternal truths, the realm of forms where perfect mathematical relationships, moral principles, and metaphysical realities exist in their pure essence. In that state, the soul had clear and direct knowledge of all eternal verities. But when the soul becomes embodied, this clear vision becomes obscured. The soul must now perceive truth through the limitations of physical senses and the distractions of bodily needs and desires. It's as if a person who once saw clearly must now perceive the world through a thick veil or in dim, flickering light. Yet the knowledge is not lost, only hidden. Deep within the soul's memory lie all the eternal truths it once perceived clearly. The process of learning involves removing the obstacles that prevent this inner knowledge from emerging into clear consciousness. This understanding transforms the entire educational process. The teacher becomes not someone who pours information into empty vessels, but a kind of midwife who helps souls give birth to the knowledge they already carry within them. The Socratic method of questioning is designed precisely for this purpose, not to provide answers, but to ask the kinds of questions that awaken the soul's dormant wisdom. The theory also explains why certain ideas resonate so powerfully when we encounter them. Mathematical proofs, moral insights, philosophical principles, aesthetic experiences. All of these can produce moments of recognition where we feel we are encountering not something foreign, but something deeply familiar. The soul recognizes what it has always known. This process of recollection requires both active effort and patient receptivity. We must engage in the disciplined work of thinking, questioning, and contemplating. But we must also cultivate the kind of inner stillness and attention that allows buried knowledge to surface into consciousness. The obstacles to recollection are primarily the soul's attachments to the physical world and its preoccupation with temporary, changing things. When the mind is constantly distracted by sensory pleasures, social ambitions, or emotional turbulence, it lacks the quietude necessary for deeper truths to emerge. This is why philosophical education emphasizes purification of the soul, not from any puritanical hatred of the body, but as a practical requirement for accessing the knowledge that lies within. The soul must achieve a certain detachment from immediate physical concerns to perceive the eternal patterns that underlie all reality. The theory of recollection also suggests why different people seem to have different capacities for learning various types of knowledge. Some souls may have had more extensive contact with mathematical truths in their disembodied state, making them naturally inclined toward geometry or arithmetic. Others may have been more attuned to moral or aesthetic realities. But this natural inclination should not be seen as limiting, since all souls have had access to all eternal truths. It simply means that different starting points may require different approaches to awaken the full range of knowledge that lies dormant within each soul. The gradual recovery of knowledge through recollection is also a process of the soul's return to its true nature. As we remember eternal truths, we simultaneously remember our own eternal essence. Knowledge and self-knowledge are ultimately the same thing, since the soul that knows truth recognizes its own kinship with what is eternally real. This creates a beautiful recursive process. The more we learn, the more we remember who we truly are, and the more we remember our true nature, The more we become capable of learning, education becomes not just the acquisition of information, but the soul's journey home to itself. The theory suggests that no knowledge is ever truly lost. Even if particular insights fade from conscious memory, they remain present in the soul's deeper recollection and can be recovered through appropriate effort and guidance. This provides tremendous hope for human development and learning throughout life. It also implies that every soul has unlimited potential for wisdom and understanding. The differences we observe in people's intellectual or moral development reflect not fundamental limitations of capacity, but different stages in the process of awakening what is already present within. The contemplation of eternal forms is the highest form of recollection, since it involves the most direct possible contact with the realm of perfect truth that the soul knew before embodiment. Mathematical study prepares the soul for this higher recollection by developing its capacity to perceive abstract, eternal relationships. But even ordinary learning participates in this process of recollection. Every genuine insight, every moment of real understanding, every recognition of truth or beauty or goodness is the soul remembering something of its eternal nature and eternal knowledge. As you reflect on this ancient teaching, consider your own experiences of learning and insight. Have there been moments when understanding felt more like recognition than acquisition? When you felt you were remembering something you had always known but temporarily forgotten? The theory of recollection suggests that these experiences reveal something profound about your nature as an eternal soul. You are not a blank slate being written upon by experience, but a being of infinite depth, gradually awakening to the wisdom you have always carried within. This perspective transforms every moment of genuine learning into a homecoming, every insight into a reunion with your eternal nature. The path of education becomes a journey of return to your truest self, guided by the knowledge that lies dormant in the depths of your soul, waiting patiently for the right conditions to emerge into the light of conscious awareness. The divided line. To help us understand the relationship between different forms of knowledge and different levels of reality, Plato presents us with the powerful image of a line divided into segments that correspond to distinct ways of knowing and distinct types of objects that can be known. This divided line serves as a roadmap for the soul's ascent from the lowest forms of awareness to the highest possible knowledge. Imagine a vertical line divided into 4 unequal segments, with the lower portions representing lower forms of knowledge and the upper portions representing progressively higher and more reliable ways of understanding reality. The length of each segment indicates both the clarity and the reality of that particular level of knowledge. The lowest segment represents what Plato calls imagination or conjecture, our awareness of images, shadows, reflections, and representations. This includes not only literal shadows and mirror images, but also the realm of artistic representations, stories, and mental fantasies. When we look at a painting of a horse, we are in this realm of imagination, dealing with copies of copies rather than with reality itself. This level of cognition is not necessarily false, but it is the most removed from direct truth. The shadows on the cave wall belong to this category, as do the illusions and projections that often dominate human consciousness when it is not disciplined by reason or direct experience. The second segment represents belief or confidence, our ordinary sensory knowledge of physical objects in the world around us. When we see an actual horse, touch a tree, or taste an apple, we are operating in this realm. This knowledge is more reliable than mere imagination, since we are dealing with actual physical objects rather than their representations. However, this level of knowledge is still limited because physical objects are constantly changing, subject to different conditions, and perceived differently by different observers. The horse ages and changes, our perspective on the tree shifts as we move around it. The apple's taste varies depending on our health and other circumstances. The third segment represents mathematical thinking or understanding, the realm of reasoning that deals with abstract concepts, definitions, and logical relationships. Mathematics is the prime example here, where we work with perfect triangles, precise numbers, and exact logical relationships that exist independently of particular physical instances. When we prove that the sum of the angles in any triangle equals 180 degrees, we are not talking about this triangle or that triangle, but about the abstract concept of triangularity itself. This level of knowledge is more reliable than sensory belief because it deals with stable, unchanging relationships that can be known with certainty. However, mathematical thinking still relies on hypotheses and assumptions. We accept certain axioms as starting points and reason from there. While the reasoning process may be perfectly valid, it is still dependent on the truth of its initial assumptions and the accuracy of its methods. The highest segment represents philosophical knowledge or intelligence, the direct intellectual apprehension of eternal forms and first principles. This is the realm of pure dialectical thinking that seeks to understand the ultimate foundations of reality without relying on hypotheses or assumptions. In this highest form of knowledge, the mind moves beyond the need for images, examples, or hypothetical starting points. It apprehends eternal truths directly, understanding not just that something is true, but why it must be true. This is the level of knowledge that the philosopher seeks to achieve through disciplined contemplation and dialectical reasoning. The divided line also corresponds to different levels of reality, not just different levels of knowledge. The images and shadows that we apprehend through imagination have less reality than the physical objects they represent. Physical objects have less reality than the mathematical forms and principles they exemplify, and mathematical forms have less reality than the eternal forms that serve as their ultimate foundation. This creates a hierarchy of being where each level depends on the levels above it for its existence and meaning. Physical objects exist as imperfect copies of eternal forms. Images and representations derive their meaning from the physical objects they depict. The entire structure of reality flows down from the highest level, the realm of eternal forms illuminated by the form of the good. The journey upward along the divided line represents the educational process by which the soul develops greater capacity for truth and reality. Most people spend their lives primarily in the lower two segments, dealing with images and physical objects. Some develop their rational capacities sufficiently to work effectively in the realm of mathematical thinking. But very few achieve the highest level of philosophical knowledge where eternal truths can be apprehended directly. This highest knowledge requires not just intellectual ability, but moral purification and spiritual development that prepares the soul to receive the most profound truths. The movement from lower to higher levels is not automatic or easy. It requires sustained effort, proper guidance, and often the willingness to abandon comfortable but limited ways of thinking. Each transition involves a kind of conversion or turning of the soul toward a higher form of reality. The transition from imagination to belief requires learning to distinguish between representations and actual objects. The transition from belief to mathematical thinking requires developing the capacity for abstract reasoning. The transition from mathematical thinking to philosophical knowledge requires transcending the need for hypotheses and achieving direct insight into eternal principles. Each level of knowledge has its proper uses and limitations. Imagination allows us to communicate through art and story, to plan for future possibilities, and to explore creative alternatives. Belief enables us to navigate the physical world effectively and to share common experiences with others. Mathematical thinking provides the foundation for science, logic, and precise reasoning about abstract relationships. But the highest fulfillment of human knowledge comes only with philosophical apprehension of eternal truths. This is not because the lower levels are worthless, but because they find their ultimate meaning and justification in their relationship to eternal principles. The divided line also suggests that education should be a systematic process of leading souls upward through these progressively higher levels of knowledge. We begin with images and stories that awaken interest and provide initial orientation. We move to direct experience of the physical world. We develop mathematical and logical reasoning skills. Finally, we attempt the most challenging transition to pure philosophical contemplation. Each stage prepares for the next, but none should be skipped entirely. The person who tries to leap directly to philosophical knowledge without proper preparation in the lower levels will likely fall back into confusion or self-deception. But the person who remains content with lower levels of knowledge while safe from certain errors will miss the highest fulfillment of human potential. The divided line reveals that reality itself has a hierarchical structure, with each level possessing reality in proportion to its participation in eternal truth. This means that the philosopher who achieves knowledge of eternal forms is not escaping from reality but approaching reality in its most concentrated and perfect form. As you contemplate this ancient schema of knowledge and reality, consider where your own awareness typically operates. What would it mean to gradually develop greater capacity for higher levels of understanding? The Platonic vision suggests that this development is both possible and deeply fulfilling. A natural movement of the rational soul toward its proper object in the realm of eternal truth. The divided line offers both a diagnostic tool for understanding the limitations of various forms of knowledge and a program for systematic development toward the highest possible human understanding. It invites us to begin where we are, but not to remain content with partial truths when complete truth beckons from above. The Philosopher King. In one of history's most audacious political visions, Plato imagines a society governed not by the wealthy, the popular, or the powerful, but by those who have achieved the highest knowledge of eternal truth, the Philosopher Kings. This revolutionary concept emerges from his conviction that true justice in society can only be achieved when those who understand the nature of justice itself are entrusted with the responsibility of governance. The Philosopher King represents the union of wisdom and power, combining deep knowledge of eternal principles with the practical authority to implement them in the organization of human society. This is not merely an idealistic dream, but a logical conclusion drawn from the nature of knowledge and the requirements of justice. Consider the absurdity, Plato suggests, of allowing people to practice medicine without knowledge of health, or to navigate ships without understanding of seamanship. Yet in most societies, the most important decisions about justice, education, and the common good are made by those who have never seriously studied the nature of justice, truth, or human flourishing. The philosopher, by contrast, has undergone the rigorous discipline necessary to ascend from the world of shadows and opinions to the realm of eternal forms. Through years of mathematical training, dialectical reasoning, and moral purification, the philosopher's soul has been turned toward the light of truth and has achieved direct knowledge of justice, beauty, goodness, and the other eternal principles. This knowledge is not merely theoretical, but transformative. The philosopher who has contemplated the form of justice itself becomes just in character. The soul that has apprehended eternal beauty becomes beautiful. The mind that has grasped the nature of the good becomes good. Knowledge and virtue are ultimately identical, since no one who truly understands what is good would choose what is evil. The Philosopher King, having achieved this integration of knowledge and virtue, governs not for personal gain or popular approval, but according to the eternal patterns of justice and truth. Such a ruler makes decisions based on what is genuinely best for the souls of the citizens, even when this conflicts with their immediate desires or conventional opinions. This creates a fundamental challenge, since most people, like the prisoners chained in the cave, are comfortable with familiar illusions and may resist the philosopher's attempts to lead them toward truth and genuine well-being. The Philosopher King must have not only wisdom, but also the courage to implement just policies, even in the face of popular resistance. The education of Philosopher Kings requires a comprehensive program extending over many years, beginning in childhood with music and gymnastics to develop harmony between soul and body, The curriculum progresses through mathematics to develop abstract reasoning, then to dialectics to cultivate direct insight into eternal principles. Only those who successfully complete this demanding educational process and demonstrate both intellectual capability and moral integrity would be eligible for leadership roles. Age and experience further test their character, ensuring that power is entrusted only to those who have proven their devotion to truth over personal ambition. The philosopher king governs a state organized according to the principle that each person should perform the function for which they are naturally best suited. Just as justice in the individual involves each part of the soul performing its proper role, justice in the state involves each class of citizens fulfilling their appropriate function. The guardians, those with courage and spirit, provide defense and maintain order. The producers, those with natural aptitude for crafts and commerce, supply material needs. The philosophers, those with the greatest capacity for wisdom, provide guidance and make decisions about the common good. This division of labor is not a rigid caste system, but a functional organization based on natural abilities and inclinations. The state provides education to help each person discover their highest potential and assumes responsibility for ensuring that everyone can contribute meaningfully to the common good. The philosopher king's ultimate loyalty is not to any particular group of citizens, but to the form of justice itself. This transcendent allegiance enables truly impartial decision-making based on eternal principles rather than temporary interests or factional pressures. Such governance requires the philosopher king to maintain constant connection with the realm of eternal forms through ongoing contemplation and study. Power tends to corrupt because it tempts rulers to focus on immediate, practical concerns at the expense of eternal principles. The philosopher king must regularly return to the source of wisdom to maintain the moral clarity necessary for just governance. The political implications of this vision are profound and challenging. It suggests that most existing forms of government are fundamentally flawed because they place power in the hands of those who lack knowledge of justice and the good. Democracy becomes rule by ignorant opinion. Oligarchy becomes rule by greed. Tyranny becomes rule by unchecked desire. Only when knowledge and power are united in the same person can society achieve genuine justice and promote the flourishing of all citizens. This requires not just institutional changes, but a transformation in how society values and cultivates wisdom. The philosopher king must also grapple with the tension between contemplative withdrawal and active engagement. The philosopher's natural inclination is toward contemplation of eternal truths, finding fulfillment in the pure pursuit of knowledge. But the demands of justice require using this knowledge for the benefit of others, even at the cost of personal philosophical satisfaction. This tension reflects the philosopher's unique position as a bridge between the eternal and temporal realms. Having achieved knowledge of eternal principles, the philosopher has a responsibility to embody these principles in the world of becoming, to serve as a conduit through which eternal justice can influence human affairs. The philosopher king must also maintain the delicate balance between firmness and gentleness. Firmness is necessary to implement policies based on truth rather than popular opinion, but gentleness is essential for educating citizens and gradually leading them toward greater understanding of justice and virtue. This educational aspect of governance is crucial to the Platonic vision. The philosopher king is not simply a ruler but a teacher on the largest possible scale, using the entire organization of society as a means of promoting the citizens' moral and intellectual development. The ultimate goal is to create conditions where more citizens can develop their own capacity for wisdom and virtue, gradually expanding the pool of potential philosopher kings and moving society closer to the ideal of justice. While Plato acknowledged that the perfect philosopher king might never exist in reality, the vision serves as a standard by which actual governments can be evaluated and improved. It challenges us to consider what governance might look like if it were truly based on knowledge rather than opinion, virtue rather than ambition, and concern for eternal justice rather than temporary advantage. As you contemplate this ancient vision of enlightened governance, consider how it might apply to leadership in any context, whether in families, organizations, or communities. What would it mean for those with authority to base their decisions on genuine understanding of what promotes human flourishing rather than on convenience, tradition, or popular pressure? The philosopher king represents not just a political ideal, but a personal calling for anyone who has gained wisdom to use that knowledge in service of others. In whatever sphere of influence we possess, the Platonic challenge is to govern ourselves and guide others according to eternal principles of truth, justice, and goodness. The theory of love. Among Plato's most sublime teachings is his understanding of love as a cosmic force that draws the soul upward from the world of physical attraction toward the contemplation of eternal beauty itself. This theory, presented primarily in the dialogue called the Symposium, reveals love not merely as an emotion or desire, but as the fundamental energy that drives the soul's spiritual ascent toward ultimate truth. The theory begins with a profound paradox about the nature of love itself. Love is not, as we might initially suppose, the possession of what is beautiful or good. Rather, love is the recognition of beauty or goodness, coupled with the desire to unite with it permanently. Love exists precisely because of separation. It is the soul's yearning to overcome the gap between itself and what it recognizes as truly valuable. This insight transforms our understanding of erotic experience from mere physical attraction into a cosmic spiritual phenomenon. When we are attracted to a beautiful person, we are actually responding to the presence of beauty itself as it manifests through that particular individual. The attraction is not ultimately to the physical body, but to the eternal form of beauty that shines through physical appearance. However, most people mistake the reflection for the reality itself. They become attached to the particular physical form and seek satisfaction in physical union or possession of the beloved person. But since physical beauty is temporary and the forms are eternal, this approach leads inevitably to frustration and disappointment. The wise lover, guided by philosophical understanding, recognizes that physical beauty points beyond itself towards something infinitely more beautiful and satisfying. This recognition initiates an ascent through progressively more refined forms of love, each stage bringing the soul closer to its ultimate object, beauty itself in its pure, eternal form. The first stage involves attraction to one beautiful body. This initial recognition of beauty, even in its most physical form, represents the soul's awakening to value beyond mere utility or pleasure. The person experiencing this attraction is responding to something genuinely precious, even if they don't yet understand its full significance. The second stage extends this recognition to all beautiful bodies. The lover begins to understand that the beauty they admired in one person is actually a universal quality that appears in many different forms. This recognition reduces possessive attachment to any particular physical form while expanding appreciation for beauty wherever it appears. The third stage moves beyond physical beauty to appreciation of beautiful souls. The lover discovers that moral and intellectual beauty is more precious than physical attractiveness. A person of noble character, wise understanding, or generous spirit becomes more attractive than mere physical perfection. This represents a crucial transition from love based on sensory perception to love based on intellectual and moral recognition. The soul begins to love what is truly most valuable in human beings: their capacity for virtue, wisdom, and spiritual development. The fourth stage extends to love of beautiful activities, institutions, and laws. The lover develops appreciation for the forms of human organization and behavior that embody justice, courage, temperance, and other virtues. Beautiful laws, educational practices, and social arrangements become objects of admiration and devotion. The fifth stage ascends to love of beautiful knowledge itself. The lover becomes passionate about understanding, delighting in mathematical proofs, philosophical insights, and scientific discoveries for their own sake rather than for any practical application. Knowledge becomes beloved because it participates in eternal truth. The final stage reaches love of beauty itself, the eternal form that serves as the source and standard for all particular beautiful things. In this culminating experience, the lover achieves direct intellectual vision of perfect beauty, no longer mediated through particular examples or representations. This vision of absolute beauty is described as a sudden, overwhelming recognition that floods the soul with understanding and joy. It is not achieved through gradual reasoning, but comes as a kind of mystical insight to the soul that has been properly prepared through the earlier stages of ascent. The soul that achieves this vision is transformed permanently. Having seen beauty itself, it can never again mistake partial beauties for the complete reality. All particular beautiful things become transparent symbols pointing toward the eternal source that gives them whatever beauty they possess. This transformation has profound implications for how the enlightened lover relates to the world. Physical beauty is not despised or rejected, but appreciated as a reflection of eternal beauty. Human relationships become opportunities for mutual encouragement in the philosophical life rather than occasions for possessive attachment. The lover who has ascended to beauty itself becomes capable of true spiritual procreation, giving birth to beautiful ideas, institutions, and forms of life that participate more fully in eternal truth. This spiritual fertility is seen as more valuable than physical reproduction, since it creates things that partake of the soul's immortal nature. The entire process is driven by what Plato calls eros, a divine force that implants in souls the capacity to recognize and desire what is truly valuable. Eros is not blind passion, but inspired vision, the soul's natural response to its recognition of eternal truth and goodness. This understanding of love provides a framework for integrating all forms of human attraction and desire into a coherent spiritual path. Sexual desire, aesthetic appreciation, moral admiration, intellectual curiosity, and mystical longing are not separate, unrelated phenomena, but different expressions of the soul's fundamental orientation toward eternal value. The theory also suggests that love relationships at their best become mutual encouragement in philosophical development. True lovers help each other ascend the ladder of beauty, each serving as guide and companion for the other's spiritual journey toward ultimate truth. This creates a very different model of relationship than either possessive attachment or casual pleasure-seeking. Love becomes a spiritual discipline, a form of philosophical practice that gradually purifies and elevates both lovers toward their highest potential. The ascent through the stages of love parallels the soul's general journey from the world of shadows and appearances toward the realm of eternal forms. Each stage of love corresponds to a level of the divided line, moving from imagination and opinion toward mathematical thinking, and finally to direct intellectual apprehension of eternal principles. The theory explains why love is often associated with inspiration and creativity. The soul touched by eros gains access to truths and beauties that exceed ordinary rational calculation. Love becomes a form of divine madness that opens the soul to insights impossible in purely mundane consciousness. This understanding transforms the experience of longing from something painful into something sacred. The lover's sense of incompleteness and desire for union with the beloved reflects the soul's recognition of its separation from eternal beauty. This longing, properly understood and directed, becomes the driving force of spiritual development. The final vision of beauty itself is described not as the end of desire, but as its complete fulfillment. The soul that achieves union with eternal beauty finds perfect satisfaction, since it has reached the source from which all particular beauties derive their attractiveness. As you reflect on this sublime teaching, consider how it might transform your understanding of attraction, desire, and relationship. What if every experience of beauty, whether in nature, art, persons, or ideas. Were understood as an invitation to ascend toward beauty itself, the Platonic theory of love suggests that the highest human experiences point beyond themselves toward eternal realities that can satisfy the soul's deepest longings. Every genuine attraction becomes a sacred opportunity for spiritual ascent, every relationship a potential path toward the divine source of all beauty and goodness, the tripartite soul. Deep within each human being, according to Plato's profound psychological insight, exists not a simple, undifferentiated consciousness, but a complex inner world consisting of three distinct but interrelated aspects or parts of the soul. Understanding these three parts, the rational, the spirited, and the appetitive, and achieving proper harmony among them is the key to psychological health, moral virtue, and genuine happiness. The rational part of the soul, located metaphorically in the head, is the aspect of our nature that seeks truth, wisdom, and understanding. This is the part that delights in learning, enjoys solving problems, and finds fulfillment in contemplating eternal realities. When we experience the satisfaction of understanding a mathematical proof, grasping a philosophical principle, or achieving clarity about a complex issue, we are experiencing the joy of the rational soul. The rational part has a natural affinity for what is eternal, unchanging, and truly real. It is not content with mere opinions or appearances, but seeks to understand the underlying principles and causes that explain why things are as they are. This part of the soul can transcend immediate circumstances and personal interests to consider questions from an objective, universal perspective. The spirited part of the soul, located in the chest and associated with the heart and lungs, is the source of courage, ambition, and the desire for honor and recognition. This is the aspect of our nature that responds to challenges, seeks achievement, and cares about reputation and social standing. When we feel indignation at injustice, pride in accomplishment, or the motivation to persevere through difficulties, we are experiencing the energy of the spirited soul. The spirited part can ally itself either with reason or with appetite, depending on how it has been trained and what it has learned to value. When properly educated, spirit supports reason's decisions and provides the emotional energy needed to act on rational principles even when doing so requires courage or sacrifice. The appetitive part of the soul, located in the lower abdomen, encompasses all our desires for physical satisfaction, pleasure, and material acquisition. This includes not only basic biological needs like hunger, thirst, and sexual desire, but also the broader range of wants for comfort, luxury, wealth, and sensory gratification. The appetitive part is necessary for survival and can provide legitimate pleasures, but it is inherently unlimited in its desires. Left to itself, it would seek infinite satisfaction of every impulse without regard for consequences, moral considerations, or higher purposes. This part of the soul lives entirely in the present moment and judges everything according to whether it provides immediate pleasure or pain. Just as a healthy state requires proper relationships among its different classes of citizens, a healthy soul requires proper relationships among its three parts. Psychological justice occurs when each part performs its appropriate function without interfering with the others. The rational part should rule, making decisions based on knowledge of what is truly good for the whole person in the long run. The spirited part should support reason's decisions with appropriate emotions and the courage to act on rational principles. The appetitive part should be guided by reason's wisdom, seeking satisfaction in ways that are consistent with overall well-being and moral virtue. When this proper order is maintained, the person experiences psychological harmony, what Plato calls justice in the soul. Such a person acts with integrity, since all parts of their nature are aligned toward the same goals. They experience genuine satisfaction since their desires are organized according to rational understanding of what is truly fulfilling. However, when the natural order is disrupted and appetite or spirit usurps reason's rightful authority, psychological disease and moral vice result. The person becomes internally conflicted, seeking satisfactions that ultimately fail to fulfill, and making decisions that undermine their own well-being. When appetite rules, the person becomes driven by immediate desires for pleasure, comfort, or acquisition. They may become gluttonous, sexually promiscuous, greedy, or addicted to various forms of gratification. Since appetites are inherently unlimited, such a person can never achieve lasting satisfaction, but must constantly seek new pleasures to fill an inner emptiness that grows larger with each attempted satisfaction. When spirit rules without rational guidance, the person becomes dominated by anger, ambition, or the desire for honor and recognition. They may become quarrelsome, overly competitive, or obsessed with status and reputation. While such a person may achieve external success, they remain internally driven by emotions that can never provide genuine fulfillment. The appetitive part is trained through disciplined practice that teaches it to find satisfaction in moderate, healthy pleasures rather than unlimited indulgence. This doesn't require harsh suppression of natural desires, but rather the intelligent channeling of appetitive energy toward genuinely fulfilling forms of satisfaction. The integration of the three parts creates what Plato calls the philosopher's soul, a harmonious personality capable of both rational wisdom and passionate commitment to what is good. Such a person can think clearly because their emotions support rather than interfere with rational judgment. They can act decisively because their desires align with their principles. This psychological integration also enables the highest forms of love and friendship. The person whose soul is properly ordered can love others not merely for the satisfaction of their own appetites or the enhancement of their own status, but for the sake of shared wisdom and mutual encouragement in the pursuit of virtue. The three-part analysis also explains the various forms of internal conflict that characterize much of human experience. When we know what we should do but find ourselves doing something else, we are experiencing conflict between the rational and appetitive parts. When we feel torn between desire for pleasure and concern for our reputation, we are experiencing conflict between appetite and spirit. These conflicts are not abnormal or pathological, but represent the normal condition of a soul that has not yet achieved integration under rational guidance. The path to inner peace involves not the elimination of spirit or appetite, but their education and harmonious coordination with reason. The properly ordered soul also provides the foundation for social virtue and political justice. The person who has achieved harmony within themselves is naturally inclined to promote harmony in their relationships and communities. They understand from inner experience what justice means and can work effectively for the common good. Conversely, the person whose soul is disordered tends to create disorder in their social relationships. Internal conflict manifests as external conflict with others. The inability to harmonize one's own desires and principles leads to the inability to cooperate effectively with others in pursuing shared goals. This psychological theory provides both a diagnostic tool for understanding the sources of unhappiness and conflict and a practical program for achieving integration and fulfillment. By recognizing which part of the soul is dominating at any given moment, And by working to strengthen reason's capacity for wise guidance, any person can progress toward greater harmony and virtue. As you contemplate your own inner life in light of this ancient wisdom, consider how the three aspects of your soul interact in different situations. Are there areas where appetite dominates reason, leading to choices you later regret? Are there times when spirited emotions override rational judgment, causing unnecessary conflict with others? The journey towards psychological harmony is itself a form of philosophical practice, requiring the same careful attention to eternal principles that characterizes the search for truth in any other domain. As the soul learns to know itself and order itself according to rational understanding, it simultaneously progresses toward knowledge of the eternal forms that provide the ultimate standards for all truth and value. The ideal state. The ideal state emerges naturally from human needs and limitations. Individual human beings cannot be entirely self-sufficient. We need one another to provide the various goods and services necessary for a flourishing life. Some people have natural talent for farming, others for crafts, still others for trade or defense. When people specialize in what they do best and exchange their products with others, the whole community benefits. This basic principle of specialization leads to the recognition that the best society is one where each person performs the function for which they are naturally best suited, while cooperating with others to ensure that all necessary functions are fulfilled. Justice in the state consists precisely in this harmonious arrangement where everyone contributes according to their abilities and receives according to their needs. The ideal state contains three main classes of citizens, corresponding to three different types of natural talent and three different functions necessary for social well-being. The producers include farmers, craftsmen, merchants, and all those who provide material goods and services. The guardians serve as soldiers and police, protecting the community from external enemies and maintaining internal order. The rulers, drawn from the most philosophically gifted guardians, make decisions about law, policy, and the general direction of the community. When each class performs its function excellently and refrains from interfering with the functions of other classes, the state as a whole exhibits justice. Justice is not an additional virtue alongside temperance, courage, and wisdom, but the harmonious integration of all three that results when everyone fulfills their proper role. This organizational principle creates a society where individual talents are developed and utilized most effectively, where necessary social functions are reliably performed, and where the potential for internal conflict is minimized. People are not competing for positions they're unsuited for, but rather collaborating in areas where their natural gifts can make the greatest contribution. The educational system in the ideal state is designed to identify and develop each person's highest potential while preparing them for their appropriate role in the community. All children begin with the same basic education in music and gymnastics. Music to develop harmony in the soul, gymnastics to develop strength and coordination in the body. As students progress, their natural inclinations and abilities become apparent. Those with primarily practical talents move toward training in the various crafts and productive activities. Those with courageous and competitive natures progress toward guardian training. Those with the greatest capacity for abstract reasoning and moral development continue on toward the philosophical education necessary for eventual leadership. This system ensures that no one is trapped in an unsuitable role by accident of birth or social position. While people's natural talents differ, everyone has access to education that will help them discover and develop their highest capacities. The state benefits by ensuring that its most important functions are entrusted to those best equipped to perform them. The guardian class receives special attention in Plato's description because their role is so crucial to the state's well-being. Guardians must have the courage to face external enemies and the wisdom to distinguish between legitimate and illegitimate exercises of force within the community. They need the loyalty of guard dogs combined with the discrimination of philosophers. To maintain their loyalty to the common good rather than private interests, guardians live under a unique social arrangement. They own no private property beyond basic personal items, live in common quarters, and eat together in communal dining halls. Their material needs are provided by the producers, but they cannot accumulate wealth or luxury goods that might tempt them to use their power for personal advantage. The guardians also practice communal child rearing with specially arranged partnerships designed to produce the next generation of guardians according to principles that will maintain and improve the genetic and cultural qualities necessary for their function. Children are raised by the community rather than individual parents, ensuring that their loyalty remains focused on the common good rather than narrow family interests. These arrangements may seem austere, but Plato argues that they actually provide the guardians with a more fulfilling life than the pursuit of private wealth and pleasure. By focusing entirely on virtue, honor, and service to the community, guardians avoid the internal conflicts and ultimate frustrations that characterize lives dominated by material acquisition or personal ambition. The ruling class emerges from the guardian class through additional philosophical education extending over many years. Only those who demonstrate both intellectual capability and moral integrity are eligible for the highest positions of authority. The philosopher kings rule not because they desire power, but because they have the knowledge necessary for wise governance and the virtue necessary to use power for the benefit of others rather than themselves. This creates a government based on expertise rather than wealth, heredity, or popular appeal. Just as we would want our medical treatment provided by those who know the most about health, and our navigation guided by those who understand seamanship, we should want our governance provided by those who understand justice, virtue, and the conditions for human flourishing. The ideal state also includes careful regulation of cultural productions, music, poetry, and visual arts, to ensure that they support rather than undermine the moral and intellectual development of citizens. Art that celebrates virtue, honor, and wisdom is encouraged, while art that glorifies vice, cowardice, or folly is prohibited or reformed. This is not narrow censorship based on personal taste or political convenience, but thoughtful curation based on understanding of how cultural influences shape character and values. Since the goal is to create citizens capable of virtue and wisdom, the cultural environment should support rather than contradict this educational objective. The economic arrangements of the ideal state ensure that everyone's basic needs are met without creating excessive inequality or luxury that might corrupt virtue. The state is large enough to be self-sufficient and to provide opportunities for specialization, but not so large as to become unwieldy or lose the personal relationships that make genuine community possible. Private property exists for the producer class, but within limits that prevent extreme accumulation of wealth or the emergence of a leisure class that contributes nothing to the community's welfare. The focus remains on use rather than accumulation, with economic activity directed toward meeting genuine needs rather than creating artificial desires. The legal system in the ideal state is relatively simple, since much of what requires legal regulation in imperfect societies is handled through proper education and social organization. When people are trained from childhood to understand and desire what is genuinely good, and when social arrangements support rather than undermine virtue, many forms of conflict and crime simply do not arise. Laws that do exist focus on maintaining the fundamental structural arrangements that allow the state to function justly, rather than regulating details of personal behavior. The emphasis is on creating conditions where virtue can flourish naturally, rather than trying to force good behavior through detailed prohibitions and punishments. The ideal state also maintains appropriate relationships with other communities, trading peacefully when possible, but defending itself courageously when necessary. Wars are undertaken only for defensive purposes or to prevent injustice, never for conquest or material gain. The military organization and training ensure that the community can protect its way of life without becoming militaristic or aggressive. While Plato acknowledges that this ideal state may never exist perfectly in reality, it serves as a standard by which actual societies can be evaluated and improved. Every move toward greater specialization based on natural talents, more merit-based selection of leaders, better education for all citizens, and more rational organization of economic life represents progress toward the ideal. The vision challenges us to think beyond conventional assumptions about politics and social organization. Instead of accepting that societies must be dominated by the struggle for wealth, power, or popular approval, Plato suggests that human communities can be organized according to rational principles that promote the flourishing of all members. As you contemplate this ancient vision of social justice, consider how its principles might apply to contemporary institutions and relationships. What would it mean for organizations, communities, or even families to be structured according to the principle that each person should contribute according to their abilities while receiving what they need for their development? The ideal state represents not an impossible utopia, but a systematic thinking through of what human community might look like if organized according to wisdom rather than convention, virtue rather than power, and concern for genuine human flourishing rather than mere material prosperity. It invites us to imagine and work toward forms of social life worthy of rational beings seeking truth, beauty, and goodness. The allegory of the chariot. In one of Plato's most vivid and poetic images, he describes the human soul as a charioteer attempting to drive a team of two very different horses across the challenging terrain of existence. This allegory, presented in the dialogue called the Phaedrus, provides a dynamic picture of the internal struggle that characterizes the soul's journey toward truth and virtue. The charioteer represents the rational part of the soul, the aspect of our nature that seeks wisdom and understanding. Like a skilled driver, reason must guide and coordinate the movements of the entire soul, making decisions about direction and pace, while maintaining control over powerful forces that could either help or hinder the journey toward truth. The two horses represent the other parts of the soul, each with its own nature, tendencies, and potential contributions to the journey. One horse is noble, beautiful, and well-bred, representing the spirited part of the soul with its natural love of honor, courage, and noble achievement. This horse is generally cooperative with the charioteer's guidance and eager to reach elevated destinations. The other horse is ignoble, ugly, and poorly bred, representing the appetitive part of the soul with its focus on immediate pleasure and material satisfaction. This horse is difficult to control, tends to pull toward lower destinations, and often refuses to cooperate with the charioteer's attempts at guidance. The allegory captures the essential challenge of human existence, the soul's aspiration to reach the highest realms of truth and beauty, while dealing with the conflicting impulses and desires that arise from its complex nature. The journey is not smooth or automatic, but requires skill, patience, and persistent effort from the rational part of the soul. In the mythical account, souls in their disembodied state join a procession of the gods as they travel to the rim of the heavens to contemplate the eternal forms that exist beyond the physical cosmos. This represents the soul's natural desire and capacity to achieve direct knowledge of perfect truth, beauty, justice, and goodness. However, the difficulty of controlling the two horses means that most souls cannot maintain their position in the divine procession for very long. The well-behaved horse tries to rise toward the vision of eternal truth, while the badly behaved horse pulls downward toward material concerns. The charioteer struggles to coordinate these opposing forces while maintaining enough elevation to see over the rim of heaven. Some souls, those with the most skilled charioteers and the best trained horses, succeed in achieving partial or complete vision of the eternal realm. These souls are nourished by the sight of perfect reality and gain strength for continued philosophical endeavor. Other souls, overwhelmed by the difficulty of the ascent and the conflict between their horses, fall back from the divine procession and lose their wings, the power that enables them to rise toward eternal truth. These souls then fall into embodiment in the physical world, where they must work to recover their capacity for philosophical vision. The process of incarnation follows a pattern based on how much truth each soul was able to perceive during its celestial journey. Souls that achieve the clearest vision of eternal forms are born into circumstances most favorable for philosophical development. As lovers of wisdom, seekers of beauty, or followers of the muses, souls that achieved less clear vision are incarnated in progressively less favorable circumstances for philosophical life. As lawful kings, political leaders, gymnasts, prophets, poets, craftsmen, farmers, sophists, and finally, as tyrants. Each type of life provides different opportunities and challenges for the soul's development. But regardless of the circumstances of birth, every soul retains some memory of its vision of eternal truth. This latent memory can be awakened through encounters with beauty, wisdom, or goodness in the physical world. When the soul recognizes these reflections of eternal forms, it begins to remember its true nature and its capacity for higher knowledge. The experience of falling in love, particularly love inspired by physical beauty that points toward eternal beauty, can trigger this process of recollection. The lover's soul, seeing beauty reflected in the beloved, begins to grow new wings and attempts to return to the realm of eternal forms where perfect beauty exists. This process is both joyful and painful. The growing wings cause discomfort as they push through the soul's surface, and the memory of eternal beauty creates intense longing for what cannot be fully satisfied in the physical world. The lover experiences a kind of divine madness that disrupts ordinary patterns of thought and behavior. The wise lover, however, recognizes this experience as an opportunity for philosophical development rather than merely personal satisfaction. Instead of seeking to possess the beautiful person physically, the philosophical lover uses the attraction as a stimulus for ascending toward beauty itself through the stages described in the theory of love. This creates the possibility of mutual philosophical development, where both lover and beloved encourage each other's ascent toward eternal truth. The relationship becomes a form of spiritual collaboration rather than emotional dependence or physical gratification. The training of the soul represented by the chariot allegory involves developing greater harmony and cooperation among its different parts. The charioteer must become more skilled at guidance and control. The noble horse must be encouraged and strengthened in its natural love of virtue. The ignoble horse must be gradually educated to accept rational direction rather than constantly pulling toward immediate satisfactions. This training occurs through the practice of philosophy, which includes not only intellectual study but also moral discipline and spiritual purification. Mathematical study develops the rational part's capacity for abstract thinking. Contemplation of virtue strengthens the spirited part's commitment to noble goals. Moderate satisfaction of bodily needs without indulgence or suppression gradually trains the appetitive part to accept reasonable limits. As the soul achieves greater internal harmony, its capacity for philosophical vision increases. The charioteer becomes more capable of guiding the team toward elevated destinations. The horses learn to work together rather than pulling in opposite directions. The entire soul develops what Plato calls wings, the power to rise toward eternal truth and beauty. This process of developing wings is gradual and requires sustained effort over time. It cannot be rushed or forced, but emerges naturally from patient practice of philosophical virtues. As the soul becomes more harmonized and unified, it recovers its natural capacity to transcend the limitations of physical existence and approach the eternal realm where perfect forms reside. The ultimate goal, represented by the chariot allegory, is the soul's return to its true home in the realm of eternal truth. This is not an escape from embodied existence, but the fulfillment of the soul's highest potential while incarnated. The philosopher who achieves this integration becomes capable of living in both realms simultaneously, fully engaged in the practical affairs of life while maintaining connection to eternal principles that provide ultimate guidance and meaning. The allegory also suggests that philosophical development is not merely individual but fundamentally social. Souls journey together in the divine procession, and the process of mutual encouragement in philosophical love enables both partners to progress further than either could alone. The community of philosophers becomes a kind of earthly reflection of the heavenly procession, where souls support each other's ascent toward truth. This vision transforms our understanding of internal conflict from a problem to be solved into an opportunity for growth and development. The tension between reason, spirit, and appetite becomes the dynamic energy that powers the soul's ascent toward truth, provided that rational guidance can coordinate these different forces effectively. The chariot allegory reminds us that the philosophical life requires both vision and practical skill. Like the charioteer, we need not only the ability to perceive our ultimate destination, but also the expertise to manage the complex forces within our own nature that can either support or hinder our progress toward wisdom and virtue. The myth of air. At the conclusion of the Republic, Plato presents one of philosophy's most haunting and beautiful visions of what happens to the soul after death. The myth of air tells the story of a warrior who died in battle, journeyed to the afterlife, and returned to tell of what he witnessed there. Offering profound insights into the nature of moral responsibility, the consequences of our choices, and the eternal journey of the soul. As journey begins when his soul separates from his body and travels with other newly departed souls to a mysterious place where the earth opens into chasms leading downward, and upward passages emerge from the depths. This cosmic courthouse serves as a junction where souls are judged and directed according to the lives they have lived. Some souls, those who have lived justly and pursued wisdom, are directed upward toward realms of beauty and joy, where they experience the consequences of their virtuous choices. Others, those who have lived unjustly or devoted themselves to ignorant pleasures, are directed downward toward places of purification and suffering, where they must work through the consequences of their harmful actions. The duration of each soul's journey in these afterlife realms corresponds to the severity and character of their earthly choices. Most souls spend periods equivalent to 10 times their earthly lifespan, 1,000 years, experiencing the full consequences of their moral decisions. Some souls, those guilty of the most serious crimes, are condemned to even longer periods of purification. But the myth reveals that this afterlife experience, whether pleasant or painful, is not permanent punishment or reward, but rather education and preparation for the soul's next incarnation. After completing their periods of consequence and purification, souls gather to choose their next earthly lives from among the patterns of existence available for the coming cycle. This moment of choice is perhaps the most significant aspect of Ayre's vision. Each soul, now educated by its experience of the consequences of its previous life, must freely choose what kind of existence it will live next. The available choices include lives of kings and commoners, humans and animals, each with its own particular circumstances, opportunities, and challenges. The order in which souls choose is determined by lot, introducing an element of chance into the process. But Plato emphasizes that even though some souls choose early and others late, each soul remains fully responsible for its choice. The circumstances of choice may vary, but the fundamental freedom and responsibility remain absolute. The choices souls make reveal the character they have developed through their previous experiences. Some souls, having learned wisdom from their sufferings, choose modest lives that offer opportunities for continued moral and intellectual development. Others, despite their experiences, remain attached to the very kinds of choices that led to their previous sufferings. The myth tells of one soul who had previously lived virtuously but had achieved virtue through habit and good social circumstances rather than through philosophical understanding. This soul, choosing first, immediately selected the life of a powerful tyrant, attracted by the prospect of unlimited power and pleasure. Only after making this choice did the soul realize that the tyrant's life included the fate of killing and eating his own children. Consequences that had not been apparent from the surface attractiveness of unlimited power. This tragic choice illustrates one of the myth's central teachings, that true wisdom involves understanding not just the immediate attractiveness of various options, but their ultimate consequences and their effects on the soul's development. The soul that chooses wisely must look beyond appearances to understand what kinds of experiences will genuinely contribute to its flourishing and growth. Other souls demonstrate greater wisdom in their choices. The soul of Odysseus, having been educated by its previous experiences of adventure and wandering, chooses the quiet life of an ordinary citizen who minds his own affairs. This choice reflects the wisdom gained through experience, the recognition that true happiness comes not from external achievements, but from internal harmony and wisdom. The process of choosing is guided by a prophet who reminds the souls of their fundamental responsibility. The fault is not in God's, but in him who chooses. This divine pronouncement establishes the absolute moral responsibility of each soul for its destiny. While circumstances may vary and chance plays a role in the timing of choice, each soul's ultimate fate depends entirely on its own decisions. After making their choices, the souls travel toward their new incarnations, passing through the plain of forgetfulness where the river of unmindfulness flows. Most souls drink deeply from this river and lose all memory of their disembodied experiences, their previous lives, and the eternal truths they may have glimpsed during their afterlife journey. However, some souls drink only moderately from the river of forgetfulness, retaining subconscious memories that can be awakened through philosophical education. This explains why some people seem naturally drawn to wisdom and virtue, while others remain content with conventional opinions and material pursuits. The myth suggests that the process of learning and moral development extends far beyond a single lifetime. Each incarnation provides opportunities for the soul to develop capacities that may require many lifetimes to fully mature. Mathematical genius, moral wisdom, artistic inspiration, and philosophical insight may all represent the flowering of seeds planted through experiences in previous existences. This understanding transforms our perspective on the inequalities and apparent injustices of earthly existence. Differences in natural talents, social circumstances, and life opportunities reflect not arbitrary cosmic unfairness, but the complex working out of choices and consequences across multiple lifetimes. Each soul receives exactly the kinds of experiences it needs for its continued development based on the pattern it has freely chosen. The myth also provides profound consolation for the apparent meaninglessness of suffering and loss in human life. Every experience, whether pleasant or painful, serves the soul's ultimate education and development. Nothing is ultimately wasted or pointless, since all experiences contribute to the soul's growing wisdom and moral development across its eternal journey. This vision places enormous significance on moral choice and character development. Since the soul continues beyond death and carries the consequences of its choices into future existences, every decision becomes infinitely important. How we respond to challenges, how we treat others, what we choose to value and pursue. All of these shape not only our present happiness but our eternal trajectory. The myth suggests that wisdom consists primarily in understanding this larger context of choice and consequence. The truly wise person makes decisions based not on immediate appearance or conventional opinion, but on understanding of how different choices affect the soul's long-term development and capacity for truth, beauty, and goodness. For those who achieve philosophical wisdom, the cycle of death and rebirth becomes not a trap, but an opportunity for continued growth and service. The philosopher who has learned to align their choices with eternal truth contributes to the cosmic order and may eventually transcend the need for further embodied existence, achieving permanent union with the realm of eternal forms. The myth of Er concludes with Er's return to his body and his mission to share this vision with living human beings. The knowledge of the soul's eternal journey and moral responsibility is meant to influence how we live in the present, encouraging us to make choices based on their ultimate rather than immediate consequences. As you contemplate this ancient vision of death and rebirth, consider how it might transform your understanding of your own life's challenges and opportunities. What if every choice you make echoes across eternity, shaping not only your present circumstances, but your soul's infinite potential for growth and wisdom? The myth suggests that we are not victims of circumstance, but architects of our own destiny, equipped with the freedom and responsibility to choose our path toward greater truth and virtue. Death becomes not an ending, but a transition. Each life not a complete story, but a chapter in an eternal narrative of learning and development. The good beyond being. At the summit of Plato's philosophical vision stands the most mysterious and sublime of all the eternal forms, the form of the good, which transcends even existence itself and serves as the source from which all reality, truth, and value flow. This ultimate principle represents the culmination of philosophical inquiry and the final object of the soul's spiritual ascent. The good is not simply another form among others, but the principle that makes all other forms possible. Just as the sun in the physical world provides the light that makes vision possible and the energy that enables growth and life, the form of the good in the intelligible world provides the illumination that makes knowledge possible and the reality that enables all other forms to exist. This analogy between the good and the sun reveals several crucial aspects of ultimate reality. The sun cannot be looked at directly without damage to the eyes, yet it is what makes all other vision possible. Similarly, the good cannot be apprehended directly through ordinary reasoning or dialectical analysis, yet it is what makes all other knowledge possible. The good is beyond being in the sense that it transcends the ordinary categories of existence and non-existence. While other forms have being and can be known through rational analysis, the good is the source from which being itself derives. It is more real than reality, more true than truth, more valuable than all particular values. This transcendence means that the good cannot be defined or described in ordinary philosophical language. Any attempt to capture its essence in concepts or propositions necessarily falls short, since all concepts and propositions depend on the good for their own possibility and meaning. The good can only be approached through a kind of intellectual mysticism that goes beyond discursive reasoning. Yet this transcendence does not make the good irrelevant to human life and knowledge. On the contrary, The good is what gives ultimate meaning and coherence to everything else. Every act of understanding, every recognition of truth, every appreciation of beauty, every acknowledgement of justice depends on the good as its ultimate foundation and source. The philosopher's journey toward knowledge of the good represents the highest possible human achievement. This journey cannot be accomplished through ordinary study or reasoning alone, but requires a transformation of the entire soul through years of mathematical training, dialectical practice, and moral purification. The mathematical studies that form the foundation of philosophical education develop the soul's capacity to think about abstract, eternal relationships without dependence on sensory images or physical examples. This preparation is essential because the good itself is the most abstract and eternal of all realities. Dialectical training develops the soul's ability to move beyond hypothetical reasoning toward first principles that require no assumptions external to themselves. This skill is crucial for approaching the good, which serves as the ultimate first principle that validates all other knowledge without itself needing validation from anything beyond itself. Moral purification ensures that the soul's motivation for seeking knowledge remains pure and disinterested. The good can only be approached by souls that seek truth for its own sake, rather than for personal advantage, power, or even intellectual satisfaction. The soul must become as good as possible to apprehend goodness itself. When these preparations have been completed over many years of disciplined practice, the philosopher may experience what Plato calls the vision of the good, a direct intellectual apprehension of ultimate reality that comes not through reasoning, but through a kind of mystical insight that floods the soul with understanding. This vision is described as sudden and overwhelming, bringing complete certainty and perfect clarity about the nature of reality and value. The philosopher who achieves this experience is transformed permanently, gaining unshakable knowledge of what is truly real and truly valuable. However, this vision cannot be sustained indefinitely while the soul remains embodied. The philosopher returns from this mystical experience to the ordinary world of particular things and everyday concerns, but now carries within themselves the memory of ultimate truth that serves as a permanent guide for all subsequent thought and action. The philosopher who has achieved knowledge of the good becomes capable of true leadership and education because they can distinguish with perfect clarity between what is genuinely valuable and what merely appears valuable to uninformed opinion. Their decisions are guided not by conventional wisdom or personal preference, but by direct insight into the nature of ultimate reality. This knowledge also enables the philosopher to understand the proper relationships among all the other forms. Justice, beauty, courage, temperance, and all other eternal principles are seen as particular manifestations or aspects of the good itself. The good provides the unity that holds the entire realm of forms together in a coherent, intelligible structure. The political implications of this vision are profound. A society governed by those who have achieved knowledge of the good would be organized according to the ultimate principles of reality rather than according to convention, tradition, or the preferences of the majority. Such governance would promote the genuine flourishing of all citizens rather than the apparent interests of particular groups. The educational implications are equally significant. True education would be understood as the process of turning the soul toward the good, developing the capacity for increasingly clear recognition of what is ultimately real and valuable. All particular subjects of study would be valued for their contribution to this ultimate goal rather than for their practical utility or intellectual interest. The ethical implications transform the entire understanding of the moral life. Actions would be evaluated not according to their consequences for human happiness or their conformity to social rules, but according to their participation in or deviation from the good itself. Virtue becomes alignment with ultimate reality rather than simply effective functioning in social relationships. The metaphysical implications place the entire structure of reality on a secure foundation. The existence of particular things, the validity of universal principles, the possibility of knowledge, and the objectivity of values all find their ultimate ground in the good that transcends but enables everything else. This vision also provides the foundation for Platonic mysticism, the understanding that the highest human experience consists in direct union with ultimate reality. The philosopher's contemplation of the good represents not just intellectual achievement, but spiritual fulfillment, the soul's return to its ultimate source and deepest nature. The ineffability of the good does not mean that nothing can be said about it, but rather that what can be said must be understood as pointing beyond itself toward a reality that exceeds all conceptual formulation. The philosopher who has experienced the vision of the good can use language to guide others toward their own experience of ultimate truth, even though that truth itself cannot be captured in words. The good also provides the ultimate answer to the question of why anything exists at all, rather than nothing. The good is not just the highest value, but the principle of existence itself, the source from which the entire cosmos flows in all its complexity and beauty. Reality exists because goodness itself overflows in creative expression that manifests itself through the eternal forms and their temporal physical reflections. This understanding transforms the entire context of human existence from a temporary accident in a meaningless cosmos into a meaningful participation in the eternal expression of absolute goodness. Every moment of genuine understanding, every experience of authentic beauty, every recognition of true justice becomes a form of communion with ultimate reality itself. As you contemplate this most sublime aspect of Platonic philosophy, consider how it might transform your understanding of knowledge, value, and existence itself. What if all truth, beauty, and goodness that you have ever encountered were reflections of a single, ultimate source that transcends all particular manifestations while making them possible? The form of the good represents not an abstract philosophical concept, but the most practical reality possible, the ultimate foundation that gives meaning and direction to every aspect of human life. To align oneself with the good is to participate in the very principle that creates and sustains all reality, finding in that participation the deepest possible fulfillment of human nature and destiny, mathematics as preparation. In Plato's educational vision, mathematical study holds a unique and crucial position as preparation for the highest forms of philosophical knowledge. Mathematics serves as a bridge between the world of physical appearances and the realm of eternal forms, developing the soul's capacity for abstract reasoning while pointing toward truths that transcend sensory experience. The study of arithmetic begins the soul's ascent toward pure thought by dealing with numbers that exist independently of any particular physical instances. When we consider the number 7, we are not thinking about 7 apples or 7 stones, but about an abstract concept that maintains its identity regardless of what particular objects might exemplify it. This introduces the soul to the possibility of knowledge that is certain, eternal, and universal. Qualities that distinguish genuine knowledge from mere opinion based on sensory observation. The truths of arithmetic do not change with time, culture, or personal perspective. 7 plus 5 equals 12 in all possible worlds and for all rational beings. The certainty of mathematical knowledge demonstrates that the human mind is capable of apprehending eternal truths that transcend the fluctuating world of physical appearances. This capability suggests that the soul has a natural affinity for eternal realities and can develop the capacity to know other eternal truths beyond mathematics. Geometry extends this preparation by dealing with perfect spatial relationships that can be conceived by the mind but never fully realized in physical materials. The perfect circle, the ideal triangle, the infinite straight line exist as objects of mathematical thought, not as physical entities that can be drawn or constructed. When the geometer proves that the sum of the angles in any triangle equals 2 right angles, they are demonstrating a truth about the eternal form of triangularity, not about any particular physical triangle. This proof remains valid regardless of whether any actual triangles exist in the physical world. The practice of geometric proof also develops the soul's capacity for rigorous logical reasoning from premises to conclusions. This skill is essential for dialectical philosophy, which must trace the logical relationships among eternal forms and ultimately ascend to first principles that require no external validation. The study of solid geometry extends mathematical reasoning into 3 dimensions, developing the soul's ability to conceive of complex spatial relationships that exist purely as objects of thought. This further strengthens the mind's capacity to operate independently of sensory imagery while dealing with precise, eternal relationships. Astronomy, as Plato conceives it, is not the empirical observation of particular celestial bodies, but the mathematical study of perfect circular motions and harmonic ratios that govern ideal celestial mechanics. The philosopher-astronomer seeks to understand the eternal mathematical principles that underlie apparent celestial phenomena, not to accumulate observational data about particular stars or planets. This approach to astronomy develops the soul's appreciation for cosmic order and harmony, while demonstrating how eternal mathematical principles manifest themselves in the physical world. The regular movements of celestial bodies provide visible examples of the kind of orderly, rational structure that characterizes all reality when properly understood. Harmonics, the mathematical study of musical ratios and intervals, reveals how numerical relationships create the experience of beauty and aesthetic satisfaction. The discovery that pleasing musical intervals correspond to simple mathematical ratios demonstrates the deep connection between eternal truth and temporal beauty. This connection suggests that aesthetic experience, properly understood, is actually a form of knowledge, the soul's recognition of eternal mathematical principles as they manifest in sensory phenomena. Beauty becomes not merely subjective preference, but objective participation in eternal patterns of order and proportion. The progression through these mathematical disciplines gradually weans the soul away from dependence on sensory imagery and physical examples. Initially, mathematical learning may rely on diagrams, physical objects, and concrete illustrations. But gradually, the soul learns to work with pure concepts and relationships that exist independently of any particular representations. This development is crucial because the eternal forms that constitute ultimate reality cannot be apprehended through sensory experience or physical imagery. The soul that remains dependent on sensory thinking cannot ascend to the highest levels of philosophical knowledge, no matter how sophisticated its reasoning might become. Mathematical study also develops the soul's tolerance for abstraction and its appreciation for the kind of precise, rigorous thinking that philosophical dialectic requires. The mathematician learns to value logical consistency, conceptual clarity, and systematic reasoning over practical utility or immediate application. These intellectual virtues are essential for philosophical progress, since the philosopher must be able to follow arguments wherever they lead, even when the conclusions challenge conventional beliefs or personal preferences. The mathematician's commitment to logical rigor provides excellent preparation for the philosopher's commitment to truth, regardless of its practical consequences. The collaborative nature of mathematical inquiry also prepares the soul for philosophical community. Mathematical truths can be shared and verified by all rational beings, creating a form of intellectual communion based on shared recognition of eternal principles rather than personal opinion or cultural tradition. This experience of intellectual community points toward the ultimate goal of philosophical education, the creation of souls capable of recognizing and sharing knowledge of eternal forms. The mathematical community becomes a model for the philosophical community where souls united in love of wisdom can support each other's ascent toward ultimate truth. However, Plato emphasizes that mathematical knowledge, while essential as preparation, is not identical with philosophical wisdom. Mathematics still relies on hypotheses and assumptions that it accepts without question. Geometric proofs assume the validity of axioms and definitions that geometry itself does not establish. Philosophical dialectic must go beyond these hypothetical starting points to reach first principles that are self-evidently true and need no external validation. The mathematician assumes that mathematical objects exist and have certain properties. The philosopher must examine the grounds for these assumptions and trace them to their ultimate foundation in the form of the good. The transition from mathematical thinking to pure philosophical dialectic represents one of the most challenging stages in the soul's educational development. It requires abandoning the security of accepted hypotheses and venturing into the realm of first principles, where only direct intellectual insight can provide certainty. Many souls that excel in mathematical studies fail to make this transition successfully. They remain content with the kind of reasoning that proceeds from assumed premises rather than developing the capacity for direct apprehension of eternal principles that need no assumptions beyond themselves. But for those souls capable of this final transition, mathematical preparation proves invaluable. The capacity for abstract reasoning, the appreciation for eternal truth, the commitment to logical rigor, and the experience of intellectual certainty all serve the philosopher well in the ultimate ascent toward knowledge of the good itself. The mathematical curriculum thus serves both to select those souls most capable of philosophical development and to prepare them thoroughly for the challenges they will face in dialectical study. Not everyone who shows promise in mathematical studies will prove capable of philosophical wisdom, but without mathematical preparation, philosophical wisdom remains essentially impossible to achieve. As you contemplate the role of mathematical thinking in intellectual development, consider how engagement with eternal, abstract relationships might prepare the mind for other forms of knowledge that transcend sensory experience. The Platonic vision suggests that mathematical study is valuable not just for practical applications, but as training for the highest forms of human understanding. The precision, certainty, and universality of mathematical knowledge provide a glimpse of what all genuine knowledge might be like when the soul learns to apprehend eternal truths directly. In this sense, every mathematical insight becomes a step toward the ultimate goal of philosophical education. The development of souls capable of wisdom, virtue, and communion with eternal reality itself. Dialectic, the art of philosophical conversation. At the pinnacle of Platonic education stands dialectic, the art of philosophical conversation through which the soul ascends from hypothetical reasoning to direct knowledge of first principles. Dialectic represents the culmination of all previous educational preparation, the method by which the philosopher finally approaches the eternal forms themselves without dependence on assumptions or external aids. Unlike mathematics, which accepts certain axioms and definitions as starting points for reasoning, dialectic questions all assumptions and seeks to establish knowledge on foundations that are self-evidently true. The dialectical philosopher takes nothing for granted but subjects every belief, no matter how widely accepted or apparently obvious, to rigorous examination. This process begins with the kind of questioning that Socrates made famous. The systematic examination of concepts that people use confidently in everyday life but cannot define precisely when challenged. What is justice? What is courage? What is beauty? These questions initiate the dialectical process by revealing the inadequacy of conventional opinions and creating space for genuine inquiry. The Socratic method demonstrates that most people hold contradictory beliefs about fundamental concepts without realizing it. Through careful questioning, these contradictions are brought to light, creating the perplexity and intellectual humility necessary for genuine learning to begin. This initial stage of dialectic is often called negative dialectic because it seems to destroy knowledge rather than create it. Confident opinions are revealed as groundless assumptions. familiar concepts are shown to be confused and inconsistent. The person undergoing this process may feel that they know less after the questioning than they did before. However, this apparent destruction of knowledge is actually preparation for genuine knowledge. By clearing away false opinions and confused concepts, negative dialectic creates the mental space necessary for apprehension of eternal truths. The soul that clings to familiar but inadequate ideas cannot achieve the openness necessary for philosophical insight. The positive phase of dialectic begins when the soul, having been freed from the burden of false opinions, begins to apprehend the eternal forms through direct intellectual vision. This is not a matter of reasoning from premises to conclusions, but of immediate recognition of eternal principles that validate themselves through their own clarity and truth. This transition from negative to positive dialectic often occurs suddenly and unexpectedly. After long periods of questioning and perplexity, the soul may experience moments of insight where eternal truths become self-evident. These insights cannot be forced or produced through techniques, but emerge naturally when the soul has been properly prepared. The practice of dialectic requires certain moral and intellectual virtues that must be developed over years of preparation. The dialectical philosopher must have genuine love of truth that transcends personal preference or social convenience. They must be willing to follow arguments wherever they lead, even when the conclusions challenge cherished beliefs or comfortable assumptions. Intellectual courage is essential because dialectical inquiry often leads to conclusions that are unpopular or disturbing to conventional opinion. The philosopher must be prepared to stand alone if necessary in defense of truth, while remaining open to correction if better arguments emerge. Intellectual humility is equally important because the dialectical process frequently reveals the limitations of even the most sophisticated reasoning. The philosopher must be able to acknowledge ignorance and error without defensiveness, understanding that such acknowledgement is the beginning of genuine wisdom rather than an admission of failure. The collaborative nature of dialectic distinguishes it from solitary reasoning or individual speculation. Philosophical truth emerges through conversation between souls united in love of wisdom, each contributing insights while remaining open to correction and development through dialogue with others. This collaborative dimension creates a form of intellectual community that transcends personal ego and cultural prejudice. In genuine dialectical conversation, participants are not trying to win debates or defend positions, but are jointly engaged in the search for truth that benefits all rational beings. The questions that guide dialectical inquiry are not arbitrary but follow a systematic pattern designed to lead the soul upward through increasingly universal and foundational concepts. Beginning with particular ethical or aesthetic questions, dialectic gradually moves toward more general principles that govern wider ranges of experience. The examination of justice in individual actions leads to questions about the nature of justice itself. The analysis of particular beautiful objects points toward investigation of beauty itself. The study of specific instances of knowledge raises questions about the nature of knowledge itself. This ascent through levels of generality mirrors the soul's ascent through the levels of reality described in the divided line. Each level of dialectical questioning corresponds to a more universal and foundational level of eternal truth, ultimately pointing toward the form of the good as the principle that makes all other knowledge possible. The method of collection and division provides a systematic approach to dialectical analysis. Collection involves gathering particular instances of a concept under a single universal form. Division involves analyzing that universal form into its constituent parts and species, revealing the internal structure of eternal reality. Through this method, the philosopher learns to carve reality at its joints, to distinguish concepts according to their natural boundaries rather than according to conventional classifications or arbitrary preferences. This skill is essential for achieving accurate knowledge of the eternal forms in their true relationships to one another. The ultimate goal of dialectical inquiry is direct apprehension of the form of the good, the first principle that requires no external validation and serves as the foundation for all other knowledge. This achievement represents the culmination of philosophical education and the fulfillment of the soul's highest potential. The philosopher who achieves knowledge of the good through dialectical ascent is transformed in character as well as understanding. Knowledge of ultimate truth necessarily produces virtue, since no one who truly understands what is good would choose what is evil. The dialectical philosopher becomes just, temperate, courageous, and wise through direct participation in the eternal forms themselves. This transformation enables the philosopher to serve as guide and teacher for other souls seeking wisdom. Having made the ascent from ignorance to knowledge, the philosopher can help others navigate the same challenging journey, providing encouragement during periods of perplexity and guidance toward genuine insights. However, the philosopher who returns from dialectical vision to ordinary social life faces significant challenges. Most people are not prepared for the kind of questioning that dialectic requires and may respond with hostility or ridicule to challenges to conventional beliefs. The philosopher must learn to adapt dialectical insights to the capacities and needs of different audiences. The political dimension of dialectic becomes crucial when philosophers assume responsibility for governance or education. The philosopher king must be able to translate dialectical knowledge of eternal principles into practical policies that promote justice and virtue in particular circumstances. This requires a kind of practical wisdom that complements pure dialectical insight. The ability to recognize how eternal principles should be applied in the complex, changing world of human affairs. The philosopher must become skilled not only in ascending to eternal truth, but also in descending from that truth to effective action in temporal circumstances. The teaching of dialectic presents special challenges because it cannot be reduced to a set of techniques or procedures that can be mechanically applied. Each dialectical conversation is unique, requiring sensitivity to the particular needs, capacities, and resistances of the participants. The dialectical teacher must be able to ask the right questions at the right time, to recognize when pushing forward and when allowing time for reflection, to distinguish between productive perplexity and destructive confusion. This requires not only philosophical knowledge but also deep understanding of human psychology and moral development. As you contemplate this highest form of philosophical practice, consider how dialectical questioning might illuminate your own fundamental beliefs and assumptions. What concepts do you use confidently without being able to define precisely? What contradictions might emerge if your deepest convictions were subjected to rigorous examination? The practice of dialectic offers the possibility of moving beyond opinion and conventional wisdom toward knowledge that is genuinely certain and universally valid. This is not merely an intellectual achievement, but a transformation of the entire soul that brings it into alignment with eternal truth and prepares it for the highest forms of human fulfillment. Beauty and recollection. Among all the eternal forms, beauty holds a unique position in Plato's philosophy because it alone, among eternal principles, can be perceived through sensory experience in the physical world. While justice, wisdom, and goodness must be apprehended through pure intellectual reasoning, beauty manifests itself visibly in physical objects, making it the form most accessible to souls still embedded in material existence. This accessibility of beauty serves a crucial educational function in the soul's philosophical development. When the soul encounters genuine beauty in the physical world, in natural landscapes, works of art, or human forms, it experiences a kind of shock of recognition that awakens dormant memories of its pre-incarnate existence in direct contact with eternal forms. The experience of beauty triggers what Plato calls recollection, the gradual awakening of knowledge that the soul possessed before birth but lost through the trauma of embodiment. This is not ordinary memory of past experiences, but the recovery of direct acquaintance with eternal truths that the soul knew when it existed in unmediated contact with the realm of forms. The soul that encounters true beauty in the physical world feels a sudden stirring, a sense of recognition and longing that transcends ordinary aesthetic pleasure. This response indicates that the soul is remembering its natural affinity for eternal beauty itself, of which all particular beautiful things are merely imperfect reflections. This process of recollection through beauty explains why aesthetic experiences can be so powerful and transformative. The person overwhelmed by natural beauty, moved to tears by great art, or inspired by human loveliness, is actually experiencing the beginning of philosophical awakening. The soul's first intimation that reality extends far beyond the world of ordinary sensory experience. However, most people mistake this aesthetic experience for attraction to the physical object itself, rather than recognizing it as awakening memory of eternal beauty. They become attached to particular beautiful things, seeking to possess or recreate the experience through material means, not understanding that they are actually responding to something that transcends all material instantiation. The wise person learns to use encounters with physical beauty as stepping stones toward recollection of eternal beauty itself. Instead of becoming attached to particular beautiful objects, they recognize these objects as transparent symbols pointing beyond themselves toward the perfect beauty that serves as their source and standard. This recognition initiates the ascent through levels of beauty described in the theory of love, from appreciation of one beautiful body to love of all beautiful bodies, from physical to spiritual beauty, from particular instances to universal principles, and finally to beauty itself in its eternal perfection. Each stage of this ascent involves both fuller recollection of what the soul knew before birth and greater detachment from dependence on physical instantiations of beauty. The soul gradually recovers its capacity to appreciate beauty in increasingly pure and universal forms, approaching the direct intellectual vision of perfect beauty that characterized its pre-incarnate state. The process of recollection through beauty is often accompanied by intense emotional experiences that can be overwhelming and disorienting. The soul touched by genuine beauty may feel simultaneous joy and pain. Joy at the recognition of something infinitely precious, pain at the realization of how far it has fallen from direct contact with eternal perfection. This bittersweet quality of aesthetic experience reflects the soul's complex situation as a being naturally belonging to the eternal realm, but temporarily imprisoned in physical existence. Beauty reminds the soul of its true home while emphasizing its present separation from that home, creating both inspiration and longing. The recollection triggered by beauty also explains why aesthetic education is so important in Plato's curriculum. Exposure to beautiful music, poetry, visual arts, and natural environments helps awaken the soul's memory of eternal patterns, while developing its capacity to discriminate between genuine and spurious beauty. However, not all aesthetic experiences promote philosophical recollection. Art that merely imitates physical appearances without pointing beyond them toward eternal principles can actually hinder the soul's development by reinforcing its attachment to the world of shadows and reflections. The kind of art that serves philosophical education must embody eternal principles of harmony, proportion, and order that reflect the mathematical structure underlying all reality. Such art helps the soul recognize the presence of eternal patterns in temporal manifestations, preparing it for the eventual apprehension of pure forms through dialectical reasoning. The connection between beauty and recollection also illuminates the relationship between aesthetic and intellectual development. As the soul grows in its capacity to appreciate increasingly subtle and universal forms of beauty, it simultaneously develops its capacity for abstract reasoning and philosophical insight. This is not a mere correlation, but a deep connection rooted in the nature of the soul itself. The same capacity that enables recognition of eternal beauty enables recognition of eternal truth, justice, and goodness. Aesthetic and intellectual development are different aspects of the soul's single journey toward full recollection of its eternal nature. The The soul's response to beauty also serves as a reliable indicator of its stage of philosophical development. The person still dominated by appetitive desires responds primarily to sensual beauty and seeks to possess it physically. The person with awakened spiritual desires responds to moral and intellectual beauty and seeks to participate in it through virtuous action and shared inquiry. The philosopher whose soul has been purified through dialectical practice responds to beauty itself as manifested through all particular beautiful things, finding in each a transparent revelation of eternal principles rather than an object for possession or attachment. The cultivation of aesthetic sensitivity thus becomes an essential component of philosophical education, not as a luxury or diversion from serious study, but as a practical method for awakening the soul's latent capacity for recollection. Through careful attention to beautiful objects, sounds, movements, and ideas, the soul gradually develops its ability to perceive eternal patterns underlying temporal manifestations. This aesthetic preparation is particularly important because it engages the whole soul, rational, spirited, and appetitive parts. In the process of philosophical development, while pure dialectical reasoning primarily engages the rational part, aesthetic experience involves emotions, desires, and bodily sensations in ways that can support rather than hinder the soul's ascent toward truth. The soul that learns to find genuine satisfaction in contemplating beauty rather than possessing beautiful objects develops a form of detachment that prepares it for the more complete detachment required for philosophical wisdom. This detachment is not indifference or rejection, but rather a form of appreciation that sees through particular manifestations to eternal principles. The memory of eternal beauty also explains the creative inspiration that enables artists, poets, and musicians to produce works that seem to exceed their ordinary capacities. In moments of inspiration, the creative soul recovers fragments of its pre-incarnate knowledge and expresses through temporal media insights that point toward eternal truth. However, Plato maintains a complex relationship with artistic creation, recognizing both its potential for philosophical education and its dangers for souls not properly prepared. Art that successfully embodies eternal principles can serve as a means of recollection and philosophical awakening. But art that merely copies physical appearances or appeals to lower desires can reinforce the soul's attachment to illusion and impede its philosophical development. The key distinction lies in the artist's relationship to eternal forms. The inspired artist who has achieved some degree of philosophical understanding can create works that participate authentically in eternal beauty and serve as genuine means of recollection for appropriately prepared souls. The mere imitator who lacks philosophical understanding produces works that are copies of copies, representations of physical objects that are themselves only shadows of eternal forms. Such art moves the soul further away from truth rather than closer to it, and may actually harm the philosophical development of those who take it seriously as a guide to reality. This understanding of beauty and recollection provides a framework for integrating aesthetic experience into the philosophical life without falling into either aesthetic escapism or puritanical rejection of sensory beauty. Beautiful objects and experiences become occasions for remembering eternal truth rather than ends in themselves. The soul that has learned to use beauty properly finds in aesthetic experience a constant reminder of its eternal nature and destiny. Every encounter with genuine beauty becomes an opportunity for philosophical reflection, a moment when the veil between temporal and eternal reality becomes transparent. As you contemplate the role of beauty in your own experience, consider how encounters with natural beauty, artistic creation, or human loveliness might serve as invitations to deeper philosophical reflection. The Platonic vision suggests that aesthetic experience, properly understood, is never merely personal or subjective, but points toward eternal principles that can guide the soul's development toward wisdom and virtue. The shock of beauty that occasionally interrupts ordinary consciousness may be the soul's recognition of its true home in the realm of eternal forms, calling it to remember who it truly is and where it ultimately belongs. In this sense, every genuine aesthetic experience becomes a form of philosophical education, a gentle awakening of the soul's capacity for eternal truth. The unexamined life. At the foundation of Platonic philosophy lies the revolutionary insight that human life gains meaning and value only through the persistent questioning of fundamental assumptions about reality, knowledge, and virtue. This commitment to examination and inquiry, embodied perfectly in the life and teaching of Socrates, transforms philosophy from academic speculation into an urgent practical necessity for anyone seeking genuine fulfillment. The famous declaration that the unexamined life is not worth living emerges from the recognition that most human beings live according to unquestioned assumptions inherited from tradition, absorbed from culture, or adopted from convention, without ever subjecting these beliefs to rigorous rational scrutiny. This unreflective acceptance of inherited opinions leaves the soul trapped in ignorance, unable to distinguish between genuine knowledge and mere prejudice. The examined life, by contrast, involves the constant questioning of one's beliefs, values, and assumptions in the search for principles that can withstand rational scrutiny. This examination is not a merely intellectual exercise, but a transformation of the entire soul that affects how one lives, what one values, and how one relates to others and to reality itself. Socratic questioning begins with the recognition of ignorance, not the ignorance of lacking information, but the deeper ignorance of mistaking opinion for knowledge and assumption for truth. This recognition requires intellectual humility that acknowledges the limitations of human understanding while maintaining confidence in reason's ability to make progress toward truth through persistent inquiry. The method of examination involves taking concepts that people use confidently in daily life and subjecting them to systematic analysis that reveals their hidden complexities and contradictions. What is justice? What is courage? What is friendship? These questions seem simple until one attempts to provide definitions that are both accurate and comprehensive. Through this process of questioning, it becomes apparent that most people hold inconsistent beliefs about fundamental concepts without realizing the contradictions. They may simultaneously believe that justice involves treating people equally, and that justice requires giving people what they deserve, without recognizing the potential conflicts between these principles. The revelation of these contradictions is not the end goal of Socratic examination, but rather the necessary beginning of genuine inquiry. Only when the soul recognizes the inadequacy of its current beliefs does it become motivated to seek more solid foundations for knowledge and action. This process of examination often produces discomfort, perplexity, and even anger in those who undergo it. People naturally prefer the security of familiar beliefs to the uncertainty that comes with recognizing their inadequacy. The Socratic questioner is often seen as a dangerous troublemaker who undermines social stability by challenging accepted wisdom. However, this discomfort is actually a sign of intellectual and moral progress. The soul that experiences genuine perplexity about fundamental questions has taken the first step toward wisdom. The recognition of ignorance creates the motivation for learning that is absent when one believes oneself already to possess adequate knowledge. The examined life requires certain virtues that must be cultivated through practice and discipline. Intellectual courage enables one to follow questions wherever they lead, even when the conclusions challenge comfortable beliefs or social expectations. Intellectual honesty requires acknowledging when one's arguments are weak or one's knowledge is limited, resisting the temptation to defend positions out of pride or stubbornness. Intellectual humility recognizes that human understanding is fallible and limited, remaining open to correction and revision while avoiding both dogmatism and skeptical despair. The person committed to examination maintains confidence in reason's ability to make progress toward truth, while acknowledging that this progress is gradual and often uncertain. The practice of examination also requires a particular kind of relationship with others based on mutual commitment to truth rather than competition for social advantage or intellectual dominance. Genuine Socratic dialogue involves collaborative inquiry where participants help each other discover truth rather than trying to win arguments or defend predetermined positions. This collaborative dimension of examination creates forms of friendship and community that transcend ordinary social relationships based on mutual benefit or shared interests. The philosophical friendship based on shared love of wisdom creates bonds that persist across differences of background, temperament, and particular beliefs. The commitment to examination also transforms one's relationship to traditional authorities and conventional wisdom. While the examined life does not require automatic rejection of tradition, it does require subjecting all claims to rational scrutiny regardless of their source. Truth is not determined by authority, popularity, or antiquity, but by the quality of reasons and evidence that support it. This critical stance toward authority can create tension with social institutions that depend on unquestioned acceptance of their legitimacy. The person committed to examination may find themselves at odds with political leaders, religious authorities, or cultural traditions that resist rational scrutiny of their foundations. However, this tension need not result in wholesale rejection of social institutions or cultural traditions. The examined life seeks to distinguish between those aspects of tradition that can withstand rational scrutiny and those that rest merely on habit, prejudice, or the interests of particular groups. The goal is not destruction of all inherited wisdom, but the rational reconstruction of beliefs and practices on foundations that can be defended through reason and evidence. This process may preserve much traditional wisdom while discarding elements that prove to be groundless or harmful. The examined life also involves constant self-scrutiny, recognizing that the greatest obstacle to knowledge is often one's own unconscious assumptions, emotional attachments, and self-interested rationalizations. The person committed to examination must learn to question their own motives and beliefs with the same rigor they apply to the beliefs of others. This self-examination requires developing the ability to observe one's own thought processes, emotional reactions, and behavioral patterns with some degree of objectivity. It involves recognizing how personal interests, social pressures, and unconscious biases can distort judgment and lead to self-deceptive reasoning. The practice of self-examination also reveals the extent to which human behavior is often inconsistent with professed beliefs and values. Most people discover significant gaps between what they claim to believe and how they actually live, between their theoretical commitments and their practical choices. This recognition of inconsistency becomes an opportunity for moral development as the person works to align their actions more closely with their rational convictions. The examined life seeks integrity in the deepest sense, the integration of thought, feeling, and action around principles that can withstand rational scrutiny. The ultimate goal of the examined life is not the accumulation of information or even the development of sophisticated reasoning skills, but the transformation of the soul toward greater wisdom, virtue, and authentic fulfillment. Through persistent questioning and rational inquiry, the soul gradually frees itself from the bondage of ignorance and moves toward genuine knowledge of what is true and good. This transformation affects every aspect of human experience. How one understands oneself and one's place in the cosmos, how one relates to others, what one values and pursues, how one faces challenges and setbacks. The examined life becomes a way of being in the world that is guided by reason rather than impulse, by knowledge rather than opinion, by virtue rather than convention. The commitment to examination also provides a form of spiritual discipline that connects human reason to the eternal principles that govern reality. Through persistent questioning and rational inquiry, the soul develops its capacity to apprehend eternal truths that transcend particular circumstances and cultural limitations. As you reflect on your own life in light of this ancient wisdom, consider what fundamental assumptions guide your daily choices and long-term aspirations. What beliefs about reality, knowledge, and value do you hold without having subjected them to careful rational examination? The Socratic challenge is not to become paralyzed by endless questioning, but to develop the intellectual virtues necessary for making genuine progress toward truth and wisdom. The examined life is not a luxury for professional philosophers, but a practical necessity for anyone seeking authentic human fulfillment in a world full of competing claims about what constitutes the good life. The recognition that the unexamined life is not worth living transforms philosophy from an optional intellectual exercise into an essential human activity. To live as a rational being requires taking responsibility for the beliefs and values that guide one's choices, subjecting them to the kind of scrutiny that can distinguish genuine knowledge from mere opinion and authentic virtue from mere convention. The philosopher's return. One of the most challenging aspects of Plato's philosophical vision concerns the responsibility of those who have achieved knowledge to return from the realm of pure contemplation and engage with the practical affairs of human society. The philosopher who has ascended from the cave of ignorance into the sunlight of eternal truth faces a difficult choice between the satisfaction of continued contemplation and the obligation to help others begin their own journey toward enlightenment. This tension reflects a fundamental question about the relationship between contemplative wisdom and active engagement in the world. The philosopher who has achieved knowledge of eternal forms naturally prefers to continue contemplating these perfect realities rather than returning to deal with the shadows and opinions that dominate ordinary human life. The attraction of pure contemplation is understandable. Having discovered truths that are eternal, perfect, and completely satisfying to the intellect, why should the philosopher abandon this supreme happiness to engage with temporal, imperfect, and often frustrating human affairs? The contemplative life offers a kind of fulfillment that worldly activities cannot match. However, Plato argues that the philosopher who has received the gift of knowledge has corresponding obligations to those who remain in ignorance. Just as the freed prisoner in the cave allegory must return to share his discovery of the world beyond shadows, the philosopher must return from contemplation to teach, guide, and serve others who have not yet achieved similar understanding. This obligation is not merely altruistic, but reflects the nature of knowledge itself. Truth is not a private possession, but a universal good that benefits all rational beings. The philosopher who hoards knowledge for personal satisfaction violates the very nature of truth, which seeks to be shared and communicated to all who can receive it. The return to the cave is never easy or comfortable. The philosopher who has grown accustomed to the clear light of eternal truth must readjust to the dim, flickering shadows of ordinary opinion and conventional belief. What seemed clear and obvious in contemplation becomes difficult to communicate to those who have never experienced direct knowledge of eternal principles. Moreover, the returning philosopher often faces hostility and rejection from those still chained in the cave. People comfortable with familiar illusions may resist challenges to their beliefs and may even attack the messenger who brings uncomfortable truths. The philosopher's attempt to liberate others from ignorance may be seen as dangerous undermining of cherished traditions and beliefs. This resistance is not merely stubborn prejudice, but reflects genuine psychological and social challenges. The transition from ignorance to knowledge requires painful recognition of the inadequacy of familiar beliefs and the effort to develop new ways of thinking and living. Many people prefer the security of familiar illusions to the uncertainty that comes with genuine learning. The philosopher must develop special skills for communicating eternal truths to souls still trapped in temporal perspectives. This requires not only knowledge of truth, but also understanding of human psychology, pedagogy, and the art of gradual enlightenment that respects the limitations and needs of different audiences. The challenge is to find ways of expressing eternal principles through temporal means, using stories, analogies, examples, and arguments that can guide others toward truth without overwhelming them with insights they are not yet prepared to receive. The philosopher becomes a translator between the realm of eternal truth and the world of human opinion and belief. This educational responsibility extends beyond individual teaching to include participation in the organization and governance of human communities. The philosopher who understands the nature of justice itself has a responsibility to help create social arrangements that embody eternal principles rather than merely conventional preferences or power relationships. The ideal of the philosopher king emerges from this recognition that those who understand eternal principles of justice and goodness are the ones best qualified to make decisions about the common good. While this may seem like a recipe for intellectual tyranny, Plato argues that it is actually the only way to ensure that political decisions are based on knowledge rather than opinion. The philosopher king governs not for personal advantage or popular approval, but according to eternal principles that promote the genuine flourishing of all citizens. This requires the kind of knowledge that comes only through years of philosophical education and moral purification, combined with the wisdom to apply eternal principles to particular circumstances. However, the philosopher's political involvement must maintain its foundation in contemplative knowledge. The moment philosophical understanding becomes subordinated to political expediency or practical necessity, it loses its essential character and becomes merely another form of opinion-based decision-making. This creates an ongoing tension for the philosopher between the demands of contemplation and the requirements of practical engagement. The philosopher must regularly return to pure contemplation to maintain clear vision of eternal principles, while also remaining sufficiently engaged with temporal affairs to apply these principles effectively. The balance between contemplation and action requires careful judgment and often personal sacrifice. The philosopher who becomes too absorbed in practical affairs may lose the clarity of vision that makes their guidance valuable, but the philosopher who withdraws entirely from practical engagement fails to fulfill their obligation to help others and to embody eternal principles in temporal circumstances. The philosopher's return to the cave also involves accepting the limitations and imperfections that characterize all temporal applications of eternal principles. Perfect justice exists only in the realm of forms. All human institutions and relationships can only approximate this perfection to varying degrees. This recognition requires a form of practical wisdom that can distinguish between achievable improvements and impossible ideals, while maintaining commitment to eternal standards that provide direction for progressive reform. The philosopher must be both realistic about human limitations and unwilling to compromise on fundamental principles. The teaching function of the returned philosopher also requires understanding that different souls are at different stages of development and need different kinds of guidance. Some are ready for direct philosophical instruction, while others need preparatory education in mathematics, music, or moral discipline before they can benefit from dialectical inquiry. This diversity of needs means that the philosopher must be skilled in many forms of communication and education, able to meet each soul where it is while providing guidance appropriate to its current capacity and future potential. The one-size-fits-all approach to education fails to respect the individual nature of each soul's journey toward truth. The philosopher's service to others also involves creating institutions and cultural environments that support rather than hinder the development of wisdom and virtue. This includes not only formal educational institutions, but also laws, customs, and social practices that encourage rational inquiry and moral development. The ultimate goal of the philosopher's return is not merely to share information, but to awaken in others the capacity for independent philosophical inquiry. The best philosophical education produces not disciples who repeat their teachers' opinions, but new philosophers who can continue the search for truth through their own efforts and insights. This requires a kind of pedagogical humility that recognizes the limitations of what any teacher can accomplish, The philosopher can remove obstacles, provide guidance, and create favorable conditions, but each soul must ultimately make its own journey from ignorance to knowledge through its own effort and insight. As you contemplate the relationship between knowledge and responsibility, consider how your own understanding and capabilities might create obligations to help others. The Platonic vision suggests that knowledge is never purely personal, but always carries with it responsibilities to the community of rational beings seeking truth and virtue. The philosopher's return to the cave represents not a fall from grace, but the completion of philosophical development. The soul that has achieved knowledge of eternal truth finds its ultimate fulfillment not in solitary contemplation, but in sharing this knowledge with others and working to embody eternal principles in temporal institutions and relationships. This integration of contemplation and action, of wisdom and service, represents the highest form of human life, one that participates fully in both eternal truth and temporal responsibility, finding in this participation the deepest possible satisfaction of human nature and potential. The unity of the virtues. In the Platonic understanding of human excellence, the traditional virtues of wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance are not separate, independent qualities that can exist in isolation from one another. Rather, they form an integrated unity where each virtue depends upon and reinforces the others, with wisdom serving as the foundation that makes all genuine virtue possible. This unity of the virtues emerges from Plato's insight that virtue is fundamentally a form of knowledge rather than merely a matter of habit, training, or emotional disposition. The person who truly understands what is good will naturally choose good actions, while the person who chooses evil does so only out of ignorance of what is genuinely beneficial. Wisdom, the knowledge of good and evil, serves as the foundation for all other virtues because it enables the soul to distinguish between genuine goods and merely apparent goods, between actions that truly benefit and those that only seem beneficial in the short term or from a limited perspective. The wise person understands that true happiness comes from the health and harmony of the soul rather than from external goods like wealth, power, or reputation. This understanding provides the foundation for all virtuous action, since it establishes the proper hierarchy of values that should guide human choice and action. Justice, the virtue that involves giving each part of the soul and each member of society their proper due, depends entirely upon wisdom's ability to understand what truly belongs to each part and what arrangements best serve the whole. Without knowledge of human nature and the requirements for flourishing, justice becomes merely conventional fairness or arbitrary rule-following. The just person acts according to eternal principles of right relationship rather than according to personal preference or social convention. But access to these eternal principles requires the kind of philosophical wisdom that comes through dialectical inquiry and contemplation of eternal forms. Courage, the virtue that enables one to face danger and difficulty in pursuit of what is genuinely good, depends upon wisdom's knowledge of what is truly worth defending and what dangers are genuinely worth facing. Mere recklessness or stubbornness in the face of opposition is not courage if it serves no good purpose or defends no worthy cause. True courage requires understanding the relative importance of different goods and the willingness to sacrifice lesser goods for greater ones. The courageous person may risk physical safety to defend justice, but only because wisdom reveals that the integrity of the soul is more important than the preservation of the body. Temperance, the virtue that moderates desires and seeks appropriate satisfaction rather than unlimited indulgence, depends upon wisdom's understanding of what kinds of pleasures are genuinely fulfilling and what kinds ultimately lead to frustration and harm. The temperate person is not someone who suppresses all desires out of ascetic principle, but someone who understands which desires are worth satisfying and in what measure. This discrimination requires knowledge of human nature and the conditions for genuine happiness that only philosophical wisdom can provide. The integration of the virtues means that partial virtue is ultimately impossible. The person who appears courageous but lacks wisdom may display mere stubbornness or aggression. The person who seems just but lacks temperance may be motivated by pride or the desire for social approval rather than genuine love of justice. Only when all virtues are present together, unified by philosophical wisdom, does the soul achieve the kind of integrity and excellence that constitutes genuine human flourishing. The virtuous person acts from a unified character where reason, emotion, and action are all aligned toward what is genuinely good. This understanding has important implications for moral education and development. It suggests that virtue cannot be taught by simply inculcating good habits or providing moral rules, but requires the development of philosophical understanding that enables the soul to see why virtuous actions are genuinely beneficial. The moral education that produces lasting virtue must therefore include intellectual development that enables the soul to understand the eternal principles underlying ethical choice. Mathematical study, dialectical training, and contemplation of eternal forms are not optional luxuries but essential components of moral development. This connection between virtue and knowledge also explains why moral weakness and acrasia, acting against one's better judgment, present such puzzles for ethical theory. If virtue is knowledge, how can someone know what is right and still choose what is wrong? Plato's answer is that apparent cases of moral weakness actually involve conflicts between different levels of knowledge or understanding. The person may have theoretical knowledge that certain actions are wrong, while lacking the deeper, integrated understanding that would make virtuous choice natural and automatic. True moral knowledge is not merely intellectual assent to propositions about ethics, but a transformation of the entire soul that affects what one desires, fears, and finds satisfying. The person who has achieved genuine knowledge of good and evil cannot choose evil any more than the person who truly knows that fire burns can deliberately put their hand in the flame. The development of this deeper moral knowledge requires not only intellectual study but also practical experience and moral discipline that gradually align the soul's desires and emotions with rational understanding of what is good. Virtue becomes stable only when all parts of the soul cooperate in pursuing what reason recognizes as genuinely beneficial. The unity of the virtues also has implications for how we understand moral failure and moral development. Vices are not simply the absence of particular virtues, but represent fundamental ignorance about the nature of good and evil that affects all aspects of character and behavior. The person who is unjust, for example, suffers from a basic misunderstanding about what truly benefits themselves and others. This same ignorance will manifest as cowardice when facing challenges that require sacrificing apparent goods for real goods, and as intemperance when desires conflict with genuine well-being. Conversely, moral development must address the fundamental ignorance that underlies all vice rather than simply trying to correct particular behavioral problems. Lasting moral improvement requires philosophical education that enables the soul to understand the eternal principles that should guide all choice and action. The integration of intellectual and moral development in Platonic ethics challenges common assumptions about the relationship between knowledge and virtue. In contemporary culture, we often assume that intelligent people may nevertheless be morally deficient, and that moral goodness is independent of intellectual ability. Plato argues that this apparent separation results from confused ideas about what constitutes genuine knowledge and genuine virtue. Most of what passes for knowledge in ordinary life is merely opinion or technical skill, while most of what appears to be virtue is merely conformity to social expectations or habitual behavior. Genuine knowledge involves direct acquaintance with eternal principles of truth and value, while genuine virtue involves the transformation of the entire soul toward alignment with these eternal principles. When both are properly understood, their essential unity becomes apparent. This does not mean that everyone must become a professional philosopher to achieve moral excellence, but it does mean that some degree of philosophical reflection and understanding is necessary for stable virtue. The person who acts virtuously without understanding why their actions are good remains vulnerable to temptation and confusion when faced with novel circumstances or sophisticated arguments for vice. The practical implications of the unity of virtues extend to how we approach moral education, personal development, and social reform. Attempts to promote virtue that ignore the intellectual foundations of moral choice are likely to produce only superficial and temporary improvements. Lasting moral development requires creating conditions that support both intellectual growth and practical moral experience, allowing souls to develop the integrated understanding that makes virtuous choice natural and satisfying rather than forced and reluctant. As you reflect on your own moral development and the relationships among different virtues in your life, consider how intellectual understanding and practical choice interact in your experience. The Platonic vision suggests that growth in wisdom naturally supports growth in all other virtues, while moral practice creates conditions more favorable for philosophical insight. The unity of the virtues represents not an impossible ideal, but the natural result of the soul's proper development and integration. As the soul grows in wisdom and aligns itself more closely with eternal principles of truth and value, all aspects of character naturally become more harmonious and excellent, creating the kind of integrated personality that finds genuine fulfillment in virtuous action and contemplation of eternal truth. As we reach the end of our philosophical journey through the luminous world of Platonic thought, we find ourselves not at a destination, but at a new beginning. For the path toward truth, beauty, and goodness is infinite, and every insight gained opens vistas of even greater mysteries waiting to be explored. Throughout this exploration, we have encountered profound teachings that challenge our ordinary assumptions about reality, knowledge, and human nature. The allegory of the cave has shown us that what we typically take for reality may be merely shadows cast by a more fundamental truth that lies beyond ordinary perception. The theory of forms has revealed that behind the world of changing, imperfect phenomena lies a realm of perfect, eternal principles that serve as the blueprints for all existence. Justice itself, beauty itself, goodness itself exist as eternal realities that give meaning and value to their temporal, imperfect manifestations in our everyday experience. We have discovered that the human soul is not a temporary product of physical processes, but an immortal being with natural affinity for eternal truth. The soul's journey through embodied existence represents opportunities for learning and purification that extend across multiple lifetimes, each offering chances to grow in wisdom and virtue. The theory of recollection has shown us that learning is not the accumulation of new information, but the awakening of knowledge that the soul has always possessed. Education becomes not indoctrination, but midwifery, the art of helping souls give birth to the wisdom they carry within themselves. The understanding of love as cosmic force has revealed how attraction to physical beauty can become a ladder for the soul's ascent toward contemplation of eternal beauty itself. Every genuine aesthetic experience becomes an opportunity for spiritual development and philosophical insight. The analysis of the soul's tripartite structure has provided a framework for understanding internal conflict and the path toward psychological harmony. When reason rules with the support of spirit over properly disciplined appetite, the soul achieves the justice and integrity that constitute genuine happiness. The vision of the ideal state has shown us what human community might look like when organized according to eternal principles of justice, rather than mere convention or the struggle for advantage. The philosopher king ideal challenges us to imagine governance based on wisdom and virtue rather than wealth or popular appeal. Mathematical education has emerged not as mere technical training, but as preparation for the highest forms of philosophical insight. The study of eternal relationships in geometry and arithmetic develops the soul's capacity to apprehend other eternal truths through pure intellectual vision. Dialectic has been revealed as the crown of philosophical education, the art of rational conversation that leads beyond hypothetical reasoning to direct knowledge of first principles. Through systematic questioning and collaborative inquiry, souls can ascend together toward truth that validates itself through its own clarity and certainty. The recognition of beauty's unique power to trigger recollection has shown us how aesthetic experience can serve philosophical education. Every encounter with genuine beauty becomes an invitation to remember our eternal nature and aspire toward perfect beauty that serves as beauty's source. The Socratic commitment to the examined life has emerged as a practical necessity for anyone seeking authentic human fulfillment. The unexamined life proves to be not worth living because it remains trapped in the shadows of unquestioned assumption and inherited prejudice. The philosopher's obligation to return from pure contemplation to practical service has revealed how knowledge creates responsibility. Those who have achieved understanding of eternal principles must work to embody these principles in temporal institutions and relationships, helping others begin their own journey toward enlightenment. The unity of the virtues has shown us that wisdom serves as the foundation for all moral excellence. Genuine virtue requires not merely good habits or noble sentiments, but philosophical understanding that enables the soul to distinguish authentic goods from their counterfeits and simulacra. Finally, the form of the good has emerged as the ultimate principle that transcends even being itself while serving as the source from which all reality, truth, and value flow. This supreme form provides the final goal of philosophical aspiration and the foundation for all genuine knowledge and virtue. These teachings work together to create a comprehensive vision of human existence that sees each person as an eternal soul on a journey toward truth, beauty, and goodness. This journey is not completed in a single lifetime, but extends across the infinite reaches of existence, with each experience providing opportunities for growth and purification. The Platonic vision transforms our understanding of education, relationships, politics, art, and the meaning of life itself. Education becomes the turning of the soul from shadows toward light. Relationships become opportunities for mutual encouragement in philosophical development. Politics becomes the art of embodying eternal justice in temporal institutions. Art becomes either a means of recollection or a dangerous distraction from truth. Most fundamentally, human life becomes meaningful as participation in an eternal cosmic drama where souls journey from ignorance toward knowledge, from fragmentation toward unity, from illusion toward reality. Death is not an ending but a transition. Birth is not a beginning but a continuation of an infinite adventure of consciousness. This vision provides both ultimate hope and immediate responsibility. Ultimate hope because our essential nature is eternal and indestructible, connected to the ultimate source of all truth and goodness. No failure is permanent, no tragedy is final, no soul is beyond redemption. The path toward wisdom and virtue remains always open to all who choose to walk it. Immediate responsibility because our choices in this lifetime have infinite significance. How we respond to opportunities for learning, how we treat others, what we choose to value and pursue. All of this shapes our soul's eternal trajectory and contributes to the cosmic order of justice and truth. The contemplation of eternal forms does not lead away from engagement with temporal concerns, but rather provides the foundation for such engagement. The philosopher who has achieved knowledge of justice itself becomes more rather than less committed to creating just institutions. The soul that has apprehended eternal beauty finds all temporal beauty more rather than less precious, as a reflection of perfect beauty. As you continue your own philosophical journey beyond this exploration, carry with you the recognition that you are an eternal being capable of infinite growth in wisdom and virtue. The challenges and opportunities of daily life become precious chances to practice the philosophical virtues of intellectual humility rational courage, and love of truth. Remember that every genuine question opens pathways to deeper understanding. Every moment of authentic beauty provides an invitation to recollection. Every relationship offers opportunities for the kind of philosophical friendship that helps souls ascend together toward truth. The cave allegory reminds us that the journey from ignorance to knowledge requires courage to leave familiar but limited perspectives. The divided line shows us that reality has levels, and we can develop our capacity to apprehend higher and more foundational truths. The theory of recollection assures us that the capacity for wisdom lies within every soul, waiting to be awakened through proper education and sincere inquiry. Most importantly, remember that philosophy is not merely an intellectual exercise, but a way of life, a commitment to the examined existence that seeks truth for its own sake, pursues virtue as the highest form of happiness, and finds in the contemplation of eternal reality the deepest satisfaction of human aspiration. The Platonic journey is simultaneously a return home to our true nature in the realm of eternal forms, and an ongoing adventure of discovery that reveals ever deeper mysteries of truth, beauty, and goodness. Each insight gained prepares the soul for greater insights still to come. Each virtue achieved enables the development of more complete virtue. Each glimpse of eternal reality increases the soul's capacity for even clearer vision. In this eternal journey, no effort is wasted, no sincere inquiry is futile, no genuine aspiration toward truth and virtue is without lasting value. The philosopher's path leads always upward toward the light, guided by the eternal forms that serve as both destination and companions along the way. May your own journey be filled with wonder at the profound mysteries of existence, courage to question what seems obvious, wisdom to distinguish reality from appearance, and love for the eternal truths that give meaning and value to all temporal experience. The path of philosophy stretches before you, infinite in its possibilities and eternally rewarding for those who have the vision to see and the commitment to walk it. The cave awaits your return with wisdom to share. The light beckons you onward toward ever greater truth. The eternal journey home to the realm of perfect forms continues, and you are both its traveler and its destination, its seeker and its treasure, its question and its ultimate answer in the cosmic dialogue between mind and reality that constitutes the deepest mystery and greatest adventure of conscious existence.